Chapter 456. In the underground city that was shrouded by the blood-red moonlight, the atmosphere was still strange and mysterious. The empty city stood erect in this underground cave, as if it was mourning the glorious history of the past. But today, only emptiness and dilapidation were left. The evil faction people still spread out and searched the city, intending to find that mysterious person who suddenly appeared. And Chan He, who was standing on a high vantage point to survey the whole situation, his expression became more and more solemn. Even a little bit of worry appeared on his face. Under the suppression of Zhengxianmeng for many years, especially after the Battle of the Barren Valley 10 years ago, the Divine Sect had been on the decline until now. Although there were still many Divine Sect followers in the world who were loyal and determined to fight, but in the face of Zhengxianmeng, this colossus, and Fuyunji, this ruthless organization, they were powerless and only had a little momentum. And compared to the Divine Sect organizations in the outside world, the Divine Sect that lurked in the Immortal City was even more difficult. Although there was Ghost Elder's leadership and command, but for many years, everyone had been trembling with fear and trepidation. These few years to be able to develop and strengthen, and avoid the pursuit of those lackeys of Fuyunji, in fact to a large extent, was due to this mysterious underground space that Ghost Elder opened up. No one knew how Ghost Elder discovered and opened up such a huge place, but after many years of operation, this had already become the evil sect's underground base camp, and many years of experience had already shown that, unless it was the Divine Sect's own people who opened up the mechanism from the inside, otherwise, the people of the outside world would not be able to discover that in the depths of this immortal city, there was actually such a mysterious underground world hidden. Sometimes, Chen He also thought about the legend that had been passed down for many years, without any citation. This underground cave city was a part of that legendary ruins. But although this place was very strange and mysterious, but those legendary treasures, Chen He had never discovered them. Perhaps those legends were wrong. But the biggest danger now was from the sudden appearance of that mysterious person of unknown origin. That person could come to this underground cave without any warning. After Chen He knew about this, the first thing he felt was that his whole body turned cold. If the secret here was leaked, it meant that the evil sect's many years of operation might be destroyed in a day. This person must die. The catacombs were so huge that Chen He could not find out where the outsider had come from. However, his gaze kept sweeping across the city and beyond. His eyes flickered incessantly and his expression changed a few times. Suddenly, as if he had thought of something, he leaped down and pointed at the few people nearby and shouted, You! Stop searching for now. Follow me." As he spoke, he took the lead and ran forward. The three of them were startled for a moment before they followed. However, after running for a distance, Chan He suddenly turned back to look at the chef's corpse on the other side of the stairs. After a moment of silence, he called another 5 people over, including the 4 of them. They all ran towards the tunnel that they came in from. It doesn't matter what other places have collapsed. It doesn't matter if we go back and repair them. However, there's a mechanism in that tunnel that can open the passage to the outside world. We can't afford to lose it. Chen He whispered to the person beside him as he ran. Otherwise, you and I will both die a horrible death. In that circular room, Lu Chen stood in the middle of the room, looking around, his brows knitted tightly. The black dog looked much more relaxed than Lu Chen. Not sure if it was because of the long run and the previous fight. It was tired and sprawled lazily on the ground, yawning. Lu Chen searched everywhere in the circular room, including the pillar in the middle of the room, but did not find anything suspicious. There seemed to be nothing in this empty room. Other than an entrance, nothing else could be found. Such a long path leading to this place, and in the end, it was just such an inexplicable room? This, of course, did not make sense. Lu Chen shook his head, looked around and fell into deep thought. But after a long while, he still could not make any headway. After a while, he suddenly had a thought and looked up. He saw that the roof of the room was also made of pieces of stones, looking solid and heavy. The square stones were arranged neatly, and only near the central pillar was a circular shape dug out, allowing the pillar to pass through. Lu Chen walked around the pillar, looking carefully at all the places above his head, but he still did not find anything. This made him feel a little helpless. Just as he was worrying, he saw the stupid dog lying on the ground next to him sleepily. He could not help but feel a little annoyed, so he walked over and kicked it casually, saying, "Hey, stupid dog, we're going to be locked here soon. Do you have any idea?" Before the word idea left his mouth, Lu Chen's eyes suddenly lit up. After thinking for a moment, he hugged Atsu's head and dragged it to the door, saying, "Hey, stupid dog, this time it's all up to you." Atsu raised its head and looked at Lu Chen blankly. Lu Chen pointed to the ground and said in a deep voice, "Smell, smell everywhere. Apart from the two of us, did anyone else pass by here? If there is, find out where they came from." Atsu wagged its tail, looking a little hesitant, but under Lu Chen's urging, it quickly lowered its head and sniffed the empty ground. In the beginning, Atsu's movements were obviously relatively slow. Its nose sniffed the ground for a long time, left and right, as if it was carefully distinguishing or investigating something. In the middle, it looked up at Lu Chen several times, as if it was a little puzzled. However, after a while, Atsu seemed to have made some progress. It looked a little excited, and its movements became a little faster. It slowly began to walk forward on the ground, and at the same time, it was still sniffing the ground. Lu Chen was overjoyed, and he followed behind Atsu, saying, "Well, it smells good, we must find it." At this moment, his face suddenly changed slightly, and he turned to look at the door. Outside the door was still an empty passageway. There was not a single person in sight. Lu Chen frowned, walked over, and poked his head out to look at the passage outside. It was straight and long, and it was quiet. However, from a faraway place, in the midst of the silence, there seemed to be a very faint voice suddenly coming over. "Papa, papa." The sound was small and light, but it slowly became louder and clearer. It seemed that a group of people was running here quickly. Lu Chen's face turned cold, and in his eyes, black flames flashed. Chapter 457. Lu Chen's face was gloomy. A murderous look surfaced on his face. Needless to say, the pursuers outside were most likely the evil faction's troops, and right now there was no way to escape. It looked like a hopeless situation. The evil faction had a blood feud with him. It was impossible to reconcile. If they found him here, most likely it would be a bloody battle to the death. Lu Chen was well aware of this. He also knew the craziness of the evil faction's followers, but after many years of experience, countless adventures and tribulations on the edge of life and death, it had long made his will as hard as steel. Even if he were to die here today, he was not afraid of anything. In fact, compared to death, Lu Chen was more unwilling to fall into the hands of the evil faction. In the past years, he had deeply witnessed the darkest scenes of this crazy sect. Even he himself had once become a part of this darkness. He thought quietly in his heart, and then a black dagger quietly appeared in his hand. Life or death, it all depended on himself. He looked back and found that Atsu had already walked to the stone pillar in the center and was sniffing carefully, but for the time being, it seemed that there was still nothing. Lu Chen's heart suddenly moved. He thought of a strange thing. It was those two people who walked out from here. Then there must be a mechanism here that could open a secret door somewhere, but right now they could not find it. There were only two possibilities. 1. The mechanism here was too well hidden in a top-secret place. Even Atsu could not find it. 2. The evil faction sorcerers had secretly opened the door here from the beginning, and after the changes happened outside, they directly entered here and closed the secret door. Which one it was not important. The important thing was, there must be an exit here. Lu Chen looked around, his eyes flashed, and then he saw Atsu's footsteps were getting faster and faster, but he kept circling around that pillar. With every circle, Atsu would growl in a low voice, looking more and more perplexed, but he still could not find that damn mechanism's entrance. Outside the door, the footsteps were getting closer and closer, as if they had reached the last straight passage leading here. Lu Chen's eyes flashed. Suddenly he strode over, grabbed Atsu and then leaned it behind him, whispered urgently, "Go up, step on my shoulder and smell." Atsu was stunned for a moment. Before it could react, Lu Chen had already squatted down, grabbed Atsu's feet and put it on his shoulder. Atsu immediately understood. It was a little hesitant at first, but then it also leaned on him. Lu Chen let out a muffled groan. He straightened his body and pushed Atsu's body up. At the same time, his expression changed slightly. He snorted coldly and cursed. "Damn it! You stupid dog, you can't eat so much in the future. It's so heavy." Atsu let out a low growl with some dissatisfaction. It looked a little annoyed, but with Lu Chen's help, it quickly approached the roof. Atsu stood up like a human, stretched out its nose and started sniffing. Not long after, Atsu's body suddenly stopped, as if it had discovered something. It barked a few times and then looked very excited. It stretched out its two front paws and desperately slapped a piece of green brick beside the stone pillar. Lu Chen was overjoyed. Just as he was about to take action, suddenly he heard a crisp sound from above, followed by a thin piece of stone falling down, landing on the ground with a bang. At the top of the roof, a small square hole was revealed. Inside was a red handle. It was also at this moment, suddenly, the sound outside the door disappeared. Lu Chen's face suddenly darkened. He looked back, only to see a figure flashed past the door. A moment later, a figure stood at the door of this circular room. It was Chen He. And behind him, there were many figures, following one after another. The atmosphere in this room instantly became dead silent, stiff and cold. On the long street of Immortal City's White Tiger District, above and below the big pit, inside and outside, there was silence. Everyone in Fuyunji heard that sentence. That was what True Lord Tianlan said to Xue Ying, calm, indifferent, and unperturbed, as if it was a very casual instruction. But Xue Ying did not believe it, and neither did the surrounding people. However, under the pressure of the True Lord, no one dared to breathe loudly. Xue Ying's body even trembled slightly, but in the end, she still forced herself to calm down. Then a trace of sadness appeared on her face, and she slowly walked up. That tall and burly True Lord Tianlan looked down at her from above, looking like a god, like a mountain, as if he always stood high up in the clouds, as if he could easily crush mortals in the mortal world. Xue Ying felt that her hands and feet weren't listening to her, but her many years of experience in managing the Floating Clouds Agency allowed her to forcibly hold on. It was probably for the sake of her face, which she didn't really care about. She slowly walked to True Lord Tianlan's side, called out in a low voice, and then thought faintly in her heart, if a person is dead, what use is face? True Lord Tianlan did not have the intention to reason with her, nor did he have the leisure time to chat with her, and instead asked straightforwardly, do you have any ideas now? Xue Ying took a deep breath, her hands tightly clenched into fists in her sleeves, and said in a low voice, there must be something strange about the ruins below the pit. If you are willing to give me a little more time, I will definitely be able to find it. True Lord Tianlan sneered and said, how long do you need? Xue Ying was speechless. She had followed True Monarch Tianlan for many years and was well aware of this lord's terrifying and unfathomable personality. A long time ago, she had already repeatedly warned herself not to lie to this Lord True Monarch. Therefore, after hesitating for a moment, Xue Ying finally chose to tell the truth, and said bitterly, I don't know. A green aura flashed across True Lord Tianlan's face, and his gaze swept across the surrounding long street, the mess in the pit, the charred corpses, the heavily injured people lying on the ground, and said in a low voice, it's been more than 10 years. This is the worst defeat we've suffered in the hands of the Devil's Sect in more than 10 years. Xue Ying lowered her head, unable to speak, and her body trembled slightly. True Lord Tianlan looked at her, and an enormous aura swept over like a raging wave. Just as this invisible aura was about to drown this charming woman, suddenly, in this silence, everyone suddenly heard a strange rumbling sound coming from the depths of the ground. A moment later, everyone at the bottom of the pit suddenly cried out, and then retreated one after another. However, the ruins in the corner of the ruins shook, and then all kinds of runes flashed in succession, sliding away, and in the blink of an eye, a 3-foot square black hole appeared. Everyone was in an uproar, but before they could react, they heard a series of bone-chilling explosions from inside, and a thick black flame first rushed out of the hole, and then a thick cloud of black smoke. A moment later, everyone heard a shrill cry from inside the black hole, and a black shadow rushed out of the black hole, but then its body tilted in mid-air, and it fell from the sky like a kite with a broken string. Someone in the distance cried out in alarm, but in the blink of an eye, True Lord Tianlan's figure appeared in mid-air, and with one arm, he caught the person who fell from the sky. It was Lu Chen. At this moment, half of his body seemed to have been burned by the raging flames, and he looked terrible, badly mutilated, but for some reason, he still seemed to be conscious, and with some difficulty, he turned his head to look at True Lord Tianlan. True Lord Tianlan also looked at him quietly, but in the depths of that pair of eyes that were as deep as the deep sea, there seemed to be raging waves. Lu Chen looked at him, the corner of his mouth twitched, and then he actually seemed to smile. After a moment in that silence, everyone present heard that sentence, "Sigh, damn Baldy!" Before the voice died away, Lu Chen's head tilted, and he had already fainted. Chapter 458. A roar came from beneath their feet. It came from the cave again, giving everyone a fright. They turned to look and saw a tall black dog jumping out of the cave amidst the billowing black smoke. It was Atsu, of course. He looked rather disheveled. His fur had been burnt in many places, especially his buttocks, where a small patch had been burnt off. It looked rather comical. But other than that, Atu did not seem to have suffered much damage and was in good spirits. After jumping out, he shook off the dust on his body and looked up at the sky. Then, he called out to perfected Lord Tianlan and Lu Chen who had fainted in midair. Woof, 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 woof. At this moment, there was only the sound of this dog on the long street. It sounded rather strange. However, very soon, Supreme Lord Tianlan landed and casually waved his hand. Someone ran over and took over Lu Chen from his hands. At this time, Xueying also came to the side. Her bright eyes glanced at Lu Chen's face, and her expression changed slightly. She looked at True Lord Tianlan and was about to speak, but True Lord Tianlan already said coldly, "Take care of him." Xueying was taken aback. Before she could reply, she saw Supreme Lord Tianlan push Lu Chen's body towards her. Then, with a wave of his sleeve, his figure fell into the hole that was still emitting black smoke. Before his figure arrived, all the black smoke seemed to be suppressed by an invisible force. It dispersed in all directions and made a path. Under everyone's gaze, the burly figure directly entered the cave that had suddenly appeared. Xueying hurriedly called the people beside her and instructed them as quickly as possible. Bring him up. Find a safe place on the street to treat his injuries. Send people to guard him. We must not let anything happen. After saying that, she turned around and immediately picked 10 people. They were all elites with extremely high cultivation and strength in Fuyunji. Then, without hesitation, she rushed into the cave first. The others glanced at each other when they saw this, and then they followed in succession. As soon as Supreme Lord Tianlan's body landed, he felt a wave of hot air rushing towards him. A few balls of burning flame swept towards him with a whoosh. True Lord Tianlan's face was calm and tranquil, without the slightest astonishment. He didn't even make a move to dodge. Instead, he casually waved his right hand, and an invisible air wave immediately surged out of his sleeve, pushing all the surrounding black flames back about 10 feet away. This was an underground circular stone room surrounded by large chunks of hard rocks. A stone pillar stood in the middle, which was now mostly damaged. The black hole that had fallen from above was actually within this stone pillar. At this moment, there were no flammable objects in the stone room, but the flames were still burning fiercely as if they had appeared out of thin air. It was rather strange. Supreme Lord Tianlan's face was gloomy. He looked left and right and soon discovered some intact or cracked black iron balls on the ground. Extremely high temperature and remnant flames were still being emitted from within. It seemed like the raging fire in the room was caused by these black iron balls. At the same time, on the other side of the stone room, a commotion was heard. After a while, many figures appeared. It was Chen He and the rest. Looking from here, there were many figures on the spacious passageway outside, at least more than 15 to 16 people. It was a lot more than the number of people that Chen He brought here at the beginning. Thinking about it, perhaps after the fierce battle here, the evil faction demons who were still searching in the distant underground city had also rushed over one by one. Supreme Lord Tianlan's eyes lowered slightly. He saw a group of people led by Chen He were holding many similar black iron balls in their hands. Their expressions were ferocious and looked murderous. He stared at these people for a moment and suddenly sneered and said, "Is this another vicious thing made by that old turtle?" The evil sect people's countenance changed. A few of them had already loudly cursed. The old turtle was not talking about someone else. It was the only remaining evil sect elder ghost. Because the evil sect was weak, Zhengxianmeng and Fuyunji were ruthless. Therefore elder ghost had been hiding for a long time. The good faction people had never been able to find him. In addition, the word ghost was similar to turtle. Therefore the term old turtle was sometimes used by the good faction people to despise and slander elder ghost. Supreme Lord Tianlan paid no attention to those evil sect demons' curses. He looked at them coldly, flicked his sleeves and walked forward. He walked carelessly and confidently. He walked condescendingly and insufferably arrogant. It was as if the 10 or 20 extremely vicious evil sect experts were nothing to him. Standing in front, Chen He's countenance changed slightly. He stared at Supreme Lord Tianlan and seemed to have thought of something. But the few evil sect people beside him could not bear it. After cursing loudly, they directly threw the black iron balls in their hands towards Supreme Lord Tianlan. The black balls opened in mid-air with a bang. Immediately a fire seemed to light up from inside. Following which, a dazzling fire exploded like fireworks. In a flash, a ball of extremely hot flame appeared and pounced towards Supreme Lord Tianlan. Top, bottom, left, middle and right. A total of 5 fireballs flew over like they were chasing after lives and souls. They were going to burn that damn fatty to death. However, this damned fatty and damned Baldy didn't seem to care about these terrifying things that were flying towards him at all. He waved his sleeve in the air and didn't even stop his footsteps. The 5 fireballs actually flew back directly. The blazing flame made a sharp roar in the air. The speed actually increased by several times in an instant. Only a boom sound was heard. The fireball directly crashed into the evil faction crowd. Immediately it was a scene of chaos. Some people were burned by the fire and jumped in pain. There were even 2 or 3 people who were directly engulfed by the flames. They screamed and rolled on the ground. Chen He suddenly bellowed, turned and ran. He shouted, "Quickly go. This is Tianlan, that old thief." Before he finished his words, he had already swept away in the passageway. Looking at that speed, he had already used all of his strength, just to get a little further away from this seemingly tall and big damn Baldy. The evil sect disciples, who were originally incomparably furious and about to charge up and risk their lives, suddenly froze in an instant. Everyone's eyes landed on Tianlan, and then a moment later, suddenly everyone shouted at the same time and ran away together, not even caring about the injured who were still rolling around in pain on the ground. Supreme Lord Tianlan coldly snorted, looking at those evil sect people who were running away in a sorry state. His eyes revealed some disdain and walked over in big strides. At the same time, a so-so sound was heard behind him. It was Xue Ying and the people from Fuyunji jumping down. Landing on the ground, Xue Ying saw the surrounding scene clearly. At this moment, how could she not know what had happened here? Especially those people who were running away. The people from Fuyunji recognized it at a glance. Immediately, everyone's face revealed an overjoyed expression. So this is the old nest of the evil sect in the Immortal City. Xue Ying looked at Supreme Lord Tianlan with a questioning gaze. Supreme Lord Tianlan nodded. Xue Ying immediately turned back to call everyone and chased forward with the fastest speed. "Chase, we must catch that old turtle." A clear and excited voice reverberated underground. Everyone broke free from their previous dejection and ran away with joy and excitement. Only Supreme Lord Tianlan was left standing in the house. He raised his head and looked at the black hole above. His expression suddenly became a little strange and complicated. After a moment, he softly muttered to himself and said, "Could it be? This is fate." Chapter 459. The evil cult followers fled like stray dogs, even though the number of Fuyunji, Xue Ying and the others who were chasing them was much smaller than them. But no one dared to turn back, and no one thought of turning back to fight with these Fuyunji enemies to stop their pursuers. Because behind these pursuers, that tall and sturdy figure was like an insurmountable mountain, his shadow blotting out the sky and covering the earth, directly crushing all the evil cult followers' mental defenses. For so many years, True Lord Tianlan's lofty and highly respected position in the hearts of the world's good faction cultivators, if it was the evil cult followers, he would be as terrifying as a soul reaper. But fortunately, not all of the evil cult followers were scared out of their wits, even though they knew that although their group seemed to have the advantage in numbers, but in front of such a powerful demigod True Lord, Chen He still paid attention to the situation behind him as he fled. Very quickly, he discovered that the ones chasing the most closely were Xue Ying and less than 10 of her subordinates, and that True Lord Tianlan did not catch up. Chen He did not know why, but of course he would not believe that True Lord Tianlan's strength was not enough, or that he was benevolent. Most likely it was that big shot who valued his status. In the evil cult, other than the mysterious ghost elder, there was probably no one else who was worthy of him taking action. This might be an opportunity. Chen He's eyes lit up, his mind frantically thinking as he ran. He suddenly whispered a few words to the people beside him. Xue Ying was chasing after them with a face full of excitement. Seeing that they were getting closer and closer, she suddenly saw 4 or 5 devil cult demons in front of her suddenly turned around, raised their hands, and threw a few black iron balls at them. Then they ran away with all their might. Xue Ying had led Fuyunji to fight against the evil cult for many years. Naturally she was incomparably experienced, although right now she was relying on True Lord Tianlan's divine might to gain the upper hand, but along the way she actually still kept an eye out. At this moment, suddenly seeing this scene, she quickly recalled in her mind but realized that she had never seen this kind of black iron ball in the past battles with the evil faction. After a shock, Her first reaction was to stop and then shouted, "Be careful!" However, the other Fuyunji people beside him were extremely anxious. Firstly, there was the high and mighty Supreme Tianlan watching from behind. Secondly, the devil cult demons in front of them only looked like they were fleeing in panic. A few of them had already rushed over when Xueying opened her mouth to warn them. By the time they reacted and wanted to stop, those extremely fast black iron balls had already flown in front of them. Boom! A ball of raging flame suddenly appeared, instantly burning and wrapping around a man who was charging at the forefront. In the blink of an eye, the flame wrapped around him, turning him into a flaming man. A mournful scream immediately rang out. Xueying and the others were all greatly shocked, subconsciously stopping in their tracks. However, the many years of experience fighting against the evil cult still came into play at this moment. Once they saw such a strange change, almost everyone immediately reacted. Xueying gave a light shout with a calm face. Instead of retreating, she leapt into the air with a strangely shaped silk net in her hand. The silk net was completely blood red. Before it was unfurled, it was impossible to see where Xueying had hidden it. Now that it was unfurled, it instantly expanded like a magic weapon, instantly sealing off the entire passage. A strange red flying aureole appeared on this red net. She suddenly raised her head and actually let out a clear and loud cry. And behind her, the rest of the Fuyunji people rushed towards their comrade who was engulfed in flames. They frantically beat out the flames on his body and at the same time took out healing pills to treat his injuries. It seemed like they completely did not care about the remaining few equally dangerous iron balls. Or perhaps they had complete confidence in their beautiful and charming leader Xueying. In midair, Xueying's expression was solemn and dignified. She appeared to be very cautious. After a while, the remaining black iron balls all smashed into the red net. Xueying's arm shook, and the flying warblers on the red net actually flew up with a cry, directly wrapping around all the black balls. Immediately after, all the other nets on the red net rolled back, wrapping tightly layer by layer, as if they were wrapping a dumpling. Boom! This time, it was an unusually deep and frightening echo. That piece of red silk net continuously jumped a few times in the air. The red light flourished but very quickly. It quieted down and then slowly floated down. As for those terrifying raging flames, they did not appear again. There was a commotion among the devil cult people in front. Their speed of escape increased. Xueying stretched out her hand and kept the silk net. She lowered her head and looked at her comrade who had been burnt black and blue for a short period of time. She made a prompt decision to first let one person take care of him. Once his condition and injuries had stabilized, he would be sent back to the ground. Another person immediately went back to the ground. This was to mobilize all the manpower in Fuyunji. Now that the people on the ground outside were to immediately come down, she then sent out an order for more experts from Fuyunji in the Immortal City to come here at full speed. She made this series of arrangements quickly but methodically. Everyone obeyed her orders and then they continued to chase. It was also at this time, True Lord Tianlan calmly walked over from behind. When he passed by her, he glanced at Xueying. Xueying lowered her head slightly. Her face was slightly pale and guilty. True Lord Tianlan suddenly said. His voice was not loud but it was enough for everyone in this passage to hear. You did very well. After speaking, he waved his wide sleeves, with one stride, as if he had already crossed an unbelievable distance of 2 to 3 zhongs. He continued to walk forward. And behind him, Xueying suddenly raised her head. Her pearly white teeth bit her red lips. After a moment she suddenly waved her hand. Her face once again turned back to her usual grave and stern expression. Her eyes like lightning and frost, she shouted. Chase the devil cult people, if there is any resistance, kill without mercy. The long passage under the feet of these cultivators with high cultivation, especially after they sprinted and flew with all their might, it seemed to have become much shorter. Not long after, Chan He and the rest of the devil cult people rushed out of that passage and once again returned to that huge underground cave. Looking at that underground city that was shrouded by the strange blood-colored moonlight, looking at the huge underground space, Chan He shouted, Scatter and run! He had just finished his words when all of the devil cult people, like monkeys after a fallen tree, fled in all directions. At the same time, Chan He also shouted to some of the remaining devil cult people who did not know what was happening, telling them to quickly escape. And at this moment, a figure flashed in that passage. True Lord Tianlan's tall and sturdy body walked out. He casually glanced at those devil cult people who were running in all directions, suddenly sneered, suddenly stretched out a fist and directly hit the hard stone wall beside him. With a loud bang, the stone wall trembled and cracked. The piece where his fist had struck was even more fragmented, and more than a dozen fragments of various sizes flew out. True Lord Tianlan did not even look at it. His palm like floating clouds and flowing water directly brushed past. All the stones gathered with a loud rumble and gathered in his palm. Then he flung them outwards. In an instant, a sharp whistling sound pierced through the air, like thunder descending on the world. Like arrows released from a bow, these large and small stones rushed towards the demons of the evil sect who were running. Ah! Miserable cries instantly sounded at the same time, some of the devil cult people as if they were hit by a heavy blow, some directly fell to the ground, some fell to the side and some unlucky ones were hit by the large stones, directly flew out and then heavily smashed into those tall buildings' walls. A sound, after spitting out a mouthful of blood, slowly slid down and fell to the ground twitching, unable to stand up. For a time, ghostly wails and howls could be heard from the city below, but true Lord Tianlan didn't seem to care. He merely smiled disdainfully and narrowed his eyes. Then, he looked up at the strange light in the sky. The blood-colored moonlight, spilled down, shone into his eyes, indistinctly seemed to reflect his eyes into a patch of red. Chapter 460. Lu Chen saw a red door floating in the boundless night sky. The sky was decorated with stars, shining brightly. He felt that the red door of light looked familiar, as if he had seen it somewhere before. After a while, he suddenly thought of the tree hole in the mysterious seed and the two doors that appeared in the depths of the tree wall. It seemed a little similar, but after looking at it carefully for a long time, he felt that something was wrong. Lu Chen felt that his mind was a little nervous and slow, as if he could vaguely see the truth but could not grasp it. Then, he suddenly saw the red door of light in the night sky shining with extraordinary splendor, radiating a blood-red light. In the dazzling light, the door opened. In an instant, the red light illuminated the world, and a blood-red moon rose from the door, rising directly to the center of the night sky, shining brightly. Therefore, every inch and every place between heaven and earth was covered with red, looking like a sea of blood. Phew! Lu Chen let out a muffled groan, feeling a splitting headache, and suddenly woke up from the nightmare. When he opened his eyes, he saw a white wall and a familiar bed. Cold sweat seeped out of his forehead, and his breathing was rapid. But at this moment, suddenly, a broad and gentle big hand stretched out from behind him, and gently patted his shoulder. Then, he heard that familiar deep voice behind him saying, "Are you dreaming?" Lu Chen composed himself, then turned around and saw perfected Lord Tianlan sitting on the edge of his bed, looking at him with some concern. His hand was still on his shoulder, and it was as warm as a mountain. For some reason, Lu Chen inexplicably felt a prickling pain on his back, as if a knife was stabbing into his back. He looked at perfected Lord Tianlan, took a deep breath, as if he had calmed down from the nightmare, and then regained his composure saying, "Where am I? What happened?" "You were in the house at Horse-Washing Bridge. Because you were injured in the battle with the demons of the devil cult, you were unconscious for a day and just woke up." Perfected Lord Tianlan explained the situation to him briefly and straightforwardly. Then he asked, "How do you feel now?" Lu Chen hesitated for a moment, then felt pain coming from some parts of his body, but it was almost nothing to him. Other than that, there didn't seem to be any other serious internal injuries, so he nodded and said, "It's okay, I should be fine. Logically speaking, my injury shouldn't have healed so quickly. Could it be that you—" Perfected Lord Tianlan nodded. "I helped out a little." Lu Chen was silent for a moment before looking up at perfected Lord Tianlan. "You're a perfected lord of the Immortal Alliance whose name is known throughout the world and is highly respected. No matter what, you shouldn't be taking action for a nobody. Aren't you announcing to the world that there's an unknown relationship between us by doing this?" Perfected Lord Tianlan shrugged, looking as if he didn't care at all. More or less. But Lu Chen didn't want him to muddle through like this. He frowned and said, "Don't fool around. This matter is very troublesome. After what you've done, Zhengxian Meng and the devil cult will probably know that I have a close relationship with you. How can I help you with those secret matters in the future?" "No," Perfected Lord Tianlan said, "you don't have to do those things in the future." Lu Chen was startled and said with some surprise, "What? Perfected Lord Tianlan stood up and walked 2 steps in the house with his hands behind his back. He said lightly, "You should recuperate first. After 2 days, when you're better, I'll find a chance to hold a ceremony and officially announce to the world that I've accepted you as my disciple." Even if Lu Chen had long since tempered his calm disposition to remain unfazed even if Mount Tai were to collapse before him, he was astounded at this moment, and he was shocked to the point of being unable to speak for a long time. After a short while he said with slight disbelief, What's wrong with you? Why are you suddenly doing this?" Perfected Lord Tianlan smiled and said, "Because you've worked hard and made great contributions. More than 10 years ago, you sneaked into the devil cult when you were still a teenager. You were accompanied by danger day and night and only a thin line between life and death. After that, you've made great contributions time and time again. Especially in the Battle of the Desolate Valley, you reversed the situation and defeated the devil cult's 100-year plan, benefiting the people in the world. I've never been able to repay you for such contributions. Now it can be considered." "I don't believe you." Lu Chen shook his head and said. Perfected Lord Tianlan was obviously stunned. Then he sighed and said, "All right, I've raised you since you were young. No matter what happens in the future, I've only treated you like this all these years. Don't tell me that you still doubt my sincerity in raising you?" After a moment of silence, Lu Chen said slowly, "You've raised me. Naturally, I trust and respect you. I've even risked my life for you. But to be honest, given your identity and status, and..." He paused for a moment and said in a low voice, "Anyway, you didn't accept me as your disciple 10 years ago. I can't understand why you're doing this all of a sudden." Perfected Lord Tianlan turned around and stared at Lu Chen with a pair of eyes that were as deep as the sea. The light in his eyes was like surging waves that could drown a person at any time. Lu Chen also calmed down and looked at him calmly. However, no one knew that under the blanket, his palms were secretly clenched into fists and his palms were covered in cold sweat. The room was silent. After an unknown period of time, Perfected Lord Tianlan finally looked away and walked to the window. With his back facing Lu Chen, he looked out of the window and gazed at the sky in the distance. Lu Chen heaved a sigh of relief. It felt like he was being stared at by an incomparably ferocious beast. It was hair-raising. After a while, he suddenly heard Perfected Lord Tianlan, who was standing in front of the window, say something that confused him. "Do you know what luck means?" "Luck." Lu Chen was stunned. He then shook his head and said, "I don't know. Does it mean luck?" Perfected Lord Tianlan turned around and glanced at him. Lu Chen immediately waved his hand and said, "Pretend I didn't say anything." Perfected Lord Tianlan looked at him for a moment and suddenly sighed. "Over the past few decades, you're the only one who dared to talk to me like that. Yet, I've always tolerated you. Now that I think about it, it's probably what Master meant when he said luck." "Master?" Lu Chen hesitated. A sliver of sternness appeared on his face as he said, "Perhaps it's your master, the Tianhong ancestor?" Perfected Lord Tianlan nodded silently. After a moment of silence he said, "My master has only taken in 2 disciples in his life. One is me, and the other is my senior brother, Bai Chen. Senior brother Bai Chen joined the sect decades before me. Be it his realm, dermic Dao, reputation or ability, he was above me in all aspects. Everyone in the world, including the Kunlun party, thought that he would definitely inherit Master's mantle and inherit the Tian Dao title. But in the end, Master passed it on to me. Do you know why?" For some reason, Lu Chen suddenly felt nervous. In order to ease his nervousness, he forced a smile and said, "I don't know." Perfected Lord Tianlan suddenly burst into laughter. He looked like he was smiling. After a sigh he said, "Actually, I don't know either. It's just that before Master died, when I hugged his body and was at a loss of what to do, the last thing he said to me was, 'You have the luck to inherit the Dao title.'" After a pause, Perfected Lord Tianlan seemed to be in a daze as if he was recalling the past. He then said leisurely, "I remember that senior brother Bai Chen almost went mad from anger." Chapter 461. To be honest, I didn't know what providence was back then. Why did Master value it so much? I only remember that when Master passed away, he looked at me with a faint smile. His smile was a little strange. Perfected Lord Tianlan sighed and said to Lu Chen, "Therefore, There was a period of time when I even suspected that there might not be providence at all. Could it be that Master didn't like Senior Brother Bai Chen and deliberately said that? Even I was a little confused. Senior Brother Bai Chen naturally flew into a rage. He obviously didn't believe in this baffling providence, but he couldn't change Master's will. Therefore, he probably hated me from then on. However, it's no wonder. If it were me in his position, I would probably go crazy from anger too. Perfected Lord Tianlan spoke of this secret in a very relaxed manner. It even sounded a little funny and humorous. However, whenever Lu Chen thought of the situation back then, especially when the two of them became world-shaking soul formation perfected lords in the future, he felt his scalp tingle. Then, he quickly thought of the huge change in the Kunlun party a few years ago. On the night of the full moon, only one of the two soul formation perfected lords survived in the end. Nowadays, almost no one would talk about the deceased Hakushin Jinkuan anymore. After all, the faction he left behind had been wiped out. Even among the three most direct disciples, one was in seclusion and had never seen the light of day, the other defected to the enemy, and the youngest one was left. Now, it seemed like he had become a memorial archway to promote others' good deeds. That's why I still don't understand after all this talk. Can you tell me what providence is? Lu Chen asked him. Perfected Lord Tianlan thought for a moment and said to him, "It's probably good luck?" Lu Chen. Perfected Lord Tianlan laughed. He seemed to be laughing very happily. Usually, he wouldn't laugh like this. Even if he did, he would laugh in a dignified manner. His laughter would make people admire him, his laughter would shake the world, and his laughter would make everyone tremble in fear. It was only at this moment, when he was alone with Lu Chen, that he suddenly laughed to his heart's content. He clapped his hands and said, "Who cares? In any case, before my master died, he was also acting mysteriously like, 'I'll know when the time comes. I think it's fine as long as it works.'" He looked at Lu Chen and said with a smile, "Over the years, you have helped me do many things, especially when it came to defeating the devil cult. You did what others could not. This is fate. Over the years, you have been on the verge of death many times. Others have died but you have survived. I think this is also fate. Let's talk about the day before yesterday. When the Floating Clouds Company suffered a huge setback and everyone was panicking, you appeared and found the devil cult's lair. This is naturally fate." Lu Chen was silent for a while and then said, "I remember that you didn't seem to believe in providence before." "Yes, I didn't believe in providence before. That's all I have now." Perfected Lord Tianlan did not seem to mind as he said indifferently, "However, when I went down to the catacombs and saw that blood moon, I felt that you're truly different from the rest. This luck can only belong to you." "Blood moon?" Lu Chen was shocked. He thought for a moment and said, "The one on the underground city?" "Yes." A gentle breeze blew. After the door opened, Perfected Lord Tianlan's huge body walked out. After closing the door, he walked into the courtyard and bathed in the cool breeze. He looked up at the sky. The blue sky and white clouds were like crystal-clear gems. He quietly gazed into the distance, and after a while, he walked towards the main gate. However, just as he was about to leave the courtyard, he suddenly turned around to look at the room Lu Chen was in, and a complicated expression gradually appeared on his face. He seemed to be a little happy and gratified, but also a little puzzled. He looked deeply at the door, his eyes as deep as the sea reflecting some light and shadow. After a while he sighed softly, shook his head slightly and said something to himself in a low voice. His words were a little vague. Except for himself, no one could hear what he said. After a while, this world-famous perfected lord of the divine transformation realm left. His figure was elegant and his sleeves fluttered. Not long after, he once again came to the long street where something big had happened not long ago. The crater that had been created by the explosion had already been tightly surrounded by the Floating Clouds division. Not to mention passing through here, they had even sealed off the entire street. This was the Immortal City, the headquarters of Zhengxian Meng. Fuyunji was backed by a huge mountain and had great influence. They could do whatever they wanted. No one dared to block Perfected Lord Tianlan's way. Not long after, he arrived at the side of the huge pit. Xue Ying was not here today. When the people around saw Perfected Lord Tianlan, they all showed respectful expressions and greeted him. Perfected Lord Tianlan waved his hand and went down the dark passageway into the underground world. Compared to the busy, crowded and austere atmosphere on the surface, this underground cave, especially the strange city, seemed much quieter. Of course, there were also many people here. They were all people from Fuyunji or other halls in Zhengxianmeng. Every entrance and exit of the tunnel and every suspicious tunnel was guarded. Many people in the huge city were also searching from house to house, trying their best not to miss any clues. Perfected Lord Tianlan's gaze swept across the busy but orderly scene. Finally, his gaze landed on the strange statue in the center of the city. An old man was sitting cross-legged on the ground, looking up at the blood moon in the sky. He seemed to be in a daze and did not move for a long time. Perfected Lord Tianlan walked over and sat down next to the Master of Starry Hall, one of the 6 perfected lords of the true Immortal Alliance who was as famous as him. After a while he asked, "How is it? Did you see anything?" Perfected Lord Gu Yu did not answer his question immediately. Instead, he continued to stare at the blood moon. After a while he sighed and said, "I can't believe that our few generations have been wrong. All along, I thought that the blood moon would definitely rise into the night sky outside. Who would have thought that it would appear under our feet without a sound?" Perfected Lord Tianlan shrugged and did not speak. Perfected Lord Gu Yu looked at him and said, "The person who discovered this place has made a great contribution. This is truly a great contribution. We must reward him well." Perfected Lord Tianlan chuckled and said, "Don't worry, I have my reasons. Now that the blood moon has appeared, how are you going to deal with it?" Perfected Lord Gu Yu pondered for a while and said, "The true body of the seal is deep underground. It should be fine for the time being. However, this level has been tormented by the trash of the evil cult. They even inexplicably added a lot of mechanisms. Therefore, the restrictions here are basically useless. They really can't do anything right but are more than good at spoiling things." As he spoke, his face revealed an angry expression. Perfected Lord Tianlan was not that angry. He smiled and said, "Let it go and deal with it properly." Perfected Lord Gu Yu was a little surprised. He took another look at him and said, "What's wrong with you today? Why are you in such a good mood?" Perfected Lord Tianlan thought for a while and said, "I plan to organize a disciple acceptance ceremony. You should come over too. I'll call a few other old fellows." Perfected Lord Gu Yu's expression changed and revealed a rare look of surprise. He said, "You? Who's so lucky? He's ascending to the heavens in one step." Chapter 462. A strange change occurred in the battle on the Long Street. The Fuyun division was about to suffer a humiliating and crushing defeat that had not been seen for many years. In the center of the cultivation world, in the celestial city, under the attention of countless people, they were slapped in the face by the devil cult. They were utterly humiliated. However, things took a turn for the better in the end. Under the leadership of the wise Zhengxianmeng and several deity transformation stage deities, the strong and tenacious Fuyunji remained calm in the face of danger. The more they suffered, the braver they became. They found a chance of survival in the desperate situation. With the help of a powerful shadow that had infiltrated the devil cult, they broke the devil cult's trap and killed their way into the devil's cave. Finally, they destroyed the devil cult's lair that had been operating in the immortal city for decades. They killed and captured more than 100 devil cult demons. Although the only flaw was that the devil cult's chief ghost elder still managed to escape, this battle had already dealt a heavy blow to the devil cult's vitality and greatly boosted the morale of the righteous path of the world. It also proved once again that the Fuyun division was indeed an iron army personally created by Lord Tianlan. They were the guardians of justice, and they were the masters of steel that always upheld justice and justice. Isn't this boasting a bit too much? Lu Chen held the notice in his hand and looked at old Ma with a helpless expression. At this time, in Lu Chen's room, old Ma and White Lotus were all there. The black dog that was injured in the battle on the Long Street was also there. However, this time it was not lying on the ground. It was probably because it had contributed greatly to Lu Chen in the previous battle and was gloriously injured, so its status was greatly increased. Now it was lying on the soft bed proudly, taking up most of the space. However, Lu Chen did not suffer any loss. He sat on the edge of the bed and directly leaned on the hill-like black dog, looking very comfortable. Old Ma coughed and took the notice. He smiled and said, "I think it's okay. It's not much different from the truth." White Lotus, who was next to him, interrupted. "You yourself said that you were bragging. Isn't it better to say that you were bragging?" Otherwise, you might as well say that you were beaten up by the devil cult. Lu Chen rolled his eyes at the sharp-tongued girl, then asked Old Ma, "What was the final result of the battle? Was it really as the notice said?" Old Ma shook his head and said, "No." Lu Chen's face revealed an, as expected, expression. The corners of his mouth twitched as he asked, "How many are there?" Old Ma thought about it and said, "I killed more than a dozen of them and captured less than 10 alive." "What?" This time, it was White Lotus who was taken aback. She said in astonishment, "It's so different from what the notice said?" Lu Chen laughed and said to White Lotus, "Weren't you looking down on me just now? Why can't you hold it in now?" White Lotus snorted and looked a little annoyed. "I originally thought that it's okay to brag in Fuyunji. After all, we defeated the devil cult. But the number of people killed went from a dozen or 20 to over 100. It's a little too exaggerated." It had to be said that even when a beautiful girl was angry, she still had a unique charm. Not to mention that White Lotus had a beautiful and outstanding appearance. Lu Chen and Old Ma couldn't help but take another look at the beautiful girl, who was pouting slightly but vaguely captivating. Old Ma said with a smile, "That's why I said that you two are still too young. Look at me looking at this thing, your faces are calm and your mood is very calm." Lu Chen spat and said, "It's fine if you're talking about White Lotus, but how old am I? How can I be a young person? Forget it. Anyway, no matter how exaggerated this matter is, it has nothing to do with me." Old Ma was about to speak when White Lotus interrupted and said angrily, "What do you mean forget it? You two old men are so great because you're old? Let me tell you, I've already grown up. Knowledge, experience and cultivation are all up to you. If I'm worse than you in any aspect, it's my loss." After saying that, she even straightened her body and puffed out her chest with a solemn expression. This time, Lu Chen and Old Ma didn't dare to look at her anymore. Very quickly, they moved their gazes away from this already grown-up girl. They looked at each other and both looked a little embarrassed. Old Ma coughed dryly and said, "It can't be said that it has nothing to do with you. After all, it was you who made a great contribution at the critical moment and saved Fuyunji's face." Lu Chen shook his head and said, "It's not easy to say that. After all, it was so many brothers in Fuyunji who fought to the death that they could defeat the evil faction." At this moment, White Lotus interrupted again and said, "If you ask me, they really didn't take you seriously. They just casually set a shadow and brought you over. At that time, if you hadn't found the underground lair of the evil faction, I don't know how Fuyunji would have ended up." Lu Chen looked at White Lotus strangely and said with slight surprise, "What's wrong with you today? Why are you always speaking up for me?" Old Ma smiled and said, "How can you say that? That day when the tunnel collapsed, you didn't run out. White Lotus was very worried outside and has been anxiously looking for someone to save you." White Lotus's cheeks turned slightly red and then she snorted and said, "Nonsense. I'm not anxious because of him." As she said that, she walked over and sat beside Lu Chen. She reached out and patted Atsu's head and glared at the black dog and said, "I'm anxious because of Atsu. This dog still owes me something. I can't let it die like this. Am I right, Atsu?" Atsu, whose butt was burned, raised its head and looked at White Lotus. It wagged its tail and barked. White Lotus smiled and nodded slightly. She looked at Atsu as if saying, "At least you know what's good for you." Lu Chen also smiled and ignored them. He turned to Old Ma and said, "Well, let's not talk about these useless things. I have something to tell you." Before he finished speaking, they suddenly heard a few steady and crisp knocks on the door, which immediately interrupted their conversation. The expressions of the three people in the room changed slightly. After a while, Old Ma nodded to them and walked over to open the door. They saw a woman standing outside the door. She was charming and beautiful, which made people's eyes light up. It was the leader of Fuyunji, Xue Ying. Her position in Fuyunji, and even in the whole of Zhengxianmeng, was very important and should not be underestimated. Lu Chen and the others were a little surprised and stood up one after another. Xue Ying walked in and nodded to Old Ma and White Lotus. Then her gaze fell on Lu Chen. After looking him up and down, she said, "Are your injuries healed, Lu Chen?" Lu Chen nodded and said, "I'm almost healed. Thank you for your care, Hall Master Xue." Xue Ying shook her head and said, "It's all thanks to Lord True Monarch that you can recover so quickly. I don't dare to take advantage of you. As she spoke, she walked over and gestured for the others to sit down. She casually pulled over a stool and sat in front of Lu Chen. She said, "But I still didn't think that Lord True Monarch would value you so much." Lu Chen's heart moved, but his expression did not change much. He only smiled and said, "Hallmaster Shui is too polite. I'm just a small character. They're all dead. Lord True Monarch's kindness only saved my life once." Shui Ying's expression seemed a little strange. She stared at Lu Chen for a while with deep meaning in her eyes. Then she said calmly, "I came here especially for you. Pack your things and come with me. The disciple acceptance ceremony will be held in 3 days. Come with me to Heavenly Dragon Mountain." Lu Chen was startled. Before he could speak, White Lotus, who was beside him, interrupted in surprise. "Disciple acceptance? Who wants to accept a disciple? What's going on?" Everyone looked at her and saw that this young girl was frowning slightly. Her eyes were wide open and her face was slightly pale. She looked like she had suddenly become agitated. However, the few people present were all experienced individuals with sharp eyes. With a single glance, they could tell that for some unknown reason, Bai Lian's beautiful face suddenly seemed to be filled with fear. In fact, there was even a sliver of despair. Chapter 463. The room immediately became quiet. Lu Chen, Old Ma, and Shui Ying all had strange expressions on their faces. Everyone looked towards White Lotus at the same time. White Lotus, after losing her composure for a moment, quickly noticed the expressions of the others. She was startled for a moment and the expression on her face also stiffened. After a while, she quickly regained her composure. After forcing a smile, she said to everyone, "This is a great joyous occasion. How come I've never heard of it? You, Lu Chen, actually keeping your mouth shut. I've never heard you mention it before." Although this beautiful girl was trying her best to smooth things over, the reluctance in her expression still fell into everyone's eyes. However, they naturally could not say anything. Not long after, White Lotus found an excuse to leave. Shui Ying seemed indifferent to this. Although White Lotus was beautiful and moving, it could not possibly affect a girl like her. Instead, when she saw that Lu Chen and Old Ma's expressions were somewhat strange, she even smiled and asked in a seemingly profound manner, "What, do you feel sorry for them?" "Of course not." Old Ma was the first to bluntly deny it. He said, "I just find it strange that she suddenly became like this. We didn't offend her just now." Shui Ying snorted and turned to look at Lu Chen. She said, "Don't tell me that you don't know in your heart?" Lu Chen hesitated for a moment. He frowned slightly and said, "Is she also interested in that position? It can't be to this extent, right?" Sitting to the side, Old Ma's expression changed. Shui Ying, on the other hand, said indifferently, "Why not? That is the title of a true sovereign's direct disciple. It is like a protective talisman. It is a guarantee that one can rampage through the world and have a bright future. Who doesn't want it?" Old Ma seemed to understand the meaning behind these two words. After a moment of silence he said, "But doesn't she already have that identity?" Shui Ying retorted, "Can the dead compare to the living?" Of course they could not compare. Everyone knew the answer to this, and the 3 people present were all clear-minded people, so they could naturally think of this point. However, there was a deeper meaning. Old Ma did not ask, and Shui Ying did not say. In the end, it was Lu Chen who sighed with a helpless look on his face. He shook his head slightly, smiled bitterly and said, "It turns out that she really wants Tianlan to be her teacher." Since this topic was brought up by Lu Chen, Shui Ying no longer had any misgivings. She coldly said, "Originally, we didn't think that at such a young age, she could actually be so." She was probably too embarrassed to say something like, "shameless." Shui Ying snorted and changed the topic. Lord True Monarch took her in back then and announced it to the world. Naturally, she had some use for it. However, I didn't think that she could actually forget her teacher's kindness so quickly and want to climb higher. At this point, the meaning was already very clear. Shui Ying obviously thought that after her teacher, Hakushin Jinkuan, died, White Lotus had instantly forgotten her teacher's kindness in raising her. She even disregarded the unclear relationship between True Monarch Tianlan and Hakushin Jinkuan's death, and tried in vain to become True Monarch Tianlan's disciple again. As for true monarch Tianlan taking her in and not killing her, of course, it was to show the world that he had nothing to do with Hakushin Jinkuan's death. I've already taken in that senior brother's little disciple. Am I not afraid of raising a tiger in my bosom? Besides, isn't it too much for me to plot and kill senior brother by Chen? That was the gist of it. Before this, both Lu Chen and Old Ma felt that White Lotus was a precocious and abnormally intelligent girl. They had imagined many of her reactions and even felt that she might endure humiliation and cultivate to great success in the future. Then, she would find an opportunity to kill true monarch Tianlan. They wouldn't be surprised. However, they really didn't expect that White Lotus actually didn't seem to take Hakushin Jinkuan's kindness as a master seriously. It was as if she was really looking forward to becoming true monarch Tianlan's disciple. Old Ma glanced at Lu Chen and asked, "When you were on Mount Kunlun, did you see White Lotus and Hakushin Jinkuan not get along?" Lu Chen shook his head and said, "No." At that time, she was very arrogant and only spoke of her identity as the true monarch's disciple with pride. Old Ma was speechless. Beside him, Xueying stood up with a frown and said, "All right, let's not talk about this nonsense. Lu Chen, the true monarch has indeed decided to accept you as a disciple and has decided to make a grand event. In addition to announcing it to the world, he will also invite 5 other true monarchs of the Immortal Alliance to witness it in the main hall of Mount Tianlong's Fuyunji. At the same time, he will announce your past achievements." Old Ma and Lu Chen were shocked at the same time. Old Ma was anxious and asked in surprise, "Hall Master, do you mean that Lu Chen's past deeds in the devil cult will also be mentioned?" Xueying nodded and said, "Yes." Old Ma was speechless while Lu Chen sat in the distance without moving. After a while, he said in a low voice, "Are you all afraid that I won't die quickly enough? What he did in the devil cult was certainly a great achievement for the righteous path in Zhengxianmeng, but for the devil cult, it was a blood feud. So much so that he had to hide his name for more than 10 years after the Battle of the Desolate Valley. He was afraid that the devil cult would madly pursue and kill him for revenge." Now, in the disciple acceptance ceremony, once this matter was made public, needless to say, the devil cult would immediately know that the only successor of true monarch Tianlan was the traitor who destroyed the god-subduing mantra. One must know that Elder Ghost was not dead yet. No one knew how many remaining evildoers there were in the devil cult, how many hidden masters there were, and how many madmen there were. Xueying of course also understood the crux of this. So at this time, the gaze she looked at Lu Chen gradually softened. No matter what, although she was very envious of such a hot position, she really did not dare to sit on it so openly. This is true monarch's intention. Xueying slowed down her tone and said to Lu Chen with a hint of comfort, "Before I went down the mountain, true monarch specially asked me to come over and explain this to you." His original words were, "As his disciple and the successor of the Tian character Taoist name in Kunlun, these are all small difficulties, nothing to him." Lu Chen snorted and said, "He is a deity realm true monarch, naturally it is nothing to him." Xueying ignored the resentment in Lu Chen's words. She just coughed lightly and said, "He also said, either you are afraid, don't go up the mountain to be his disciple, leave the immortal city, and never appear in front of him again, or you deal with everything yourself. If you die in the hands of the devil cult's evildoers in the future, it is because you are useless." Lu Chen's expression was indifferent. After a while he stood up and said, let's go up the mountain." Old Ma wanted to say something but stopped. He stretched out his hand as if he wanted to stop him, but in the end, his hand fell down powerlessly. A trace of a smile appeared on Xueying's face. But when Lu Chen walked past Xueying, his footsteps suddenly paused. Then he turned to look at Xueying. After a while he suddenly said, "In those words just now, you probably added some oil to the fire, right?" He said indifferently, "Although I always scold at Baldy for being shameless and a bastard, that person would never say such heartless words to me." As he said this, he ignored Xueying's suddenly somewhat stiff expression and walked past her. Chapter 464. On Mount Tianlong. Inside the Kunlun Hall. This palace was the residence of perfected Lord Tianlan on Mount Celestial Dragon. As the residence of a divine transformation realm perfected lord who stood at the peak of the human cultivation world, this palace was built in a lofty and magnificent manner, which matched perfected Lord Tianlan's towering and burly appearance. From afar, he looked like a legendary giant overlooking the mortal world. As for the name, Kunlun, needless to say, It was naturally from true Lord Tianlan's own sect, the Kunlun Party. Over the years, countless people had flattered true Lord Tianlan here, saying that he did not forget his roots, that he cared about his hometown and sect, and that he was truly a person with true feelings. Of course, such treatment was only given to perfected Lord Tianlan alone. If it was any other person, everyone would probably say something along the lines of, "This lad is stupid and disrespectful, going against the sect. How can anyone use the sect's name as the name of their residence? Damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it." Not far from the Kunlun Hall was the main hall of Fuyunji. The two halls were over 100 feet apart, and they echoed each other. The Fuyunji Hall looked a bit shorter than the Kunlun Hall, and there seemed to be some meaning behind it. Lu Chen, Old Ma, and Xue Ying walked past the Fuyunji Hall, and continued to the Kunlun Hall at the back. Lu Chen looked up and saw that there was no common hall plaque hanging in front of the hall. Instead, in the empty space 10 feet in front of the hall's main entrance, there was a huge boulder that had been moved from somewhere, sitting there like a small mountain. On top of it were two large words, Kunlun. When they got closer, Lu Chen's eyes fell on the two words. He saw that the handwriting on the stone was like iron and silver hooks, bold and powerful, especially at the end of the writing, which was deep and intense, as if it was going to break through the stone and leave, which was amazing. He took a few more glances and saw that there were only these two words on the stone, but no signature. He asked Old Ma, who was walking beside him, "Who wrote these two words?" Before Old Ma could answer, Xue Ying, who was walking in front, had already turned around and replied, "This was written by Lord True Monarch himself." Old Ma was startled when he saw Xue Ying's expression from the side. He realized that although this woman's face was calm, there was a hint of worry in her eyes. Her gaze was also fixed on Lu Chen. Lu Chen replied with an "oh," and nodded slightly. However, he did not look at Xue Ying and continued to walk forward. When he walked past Xue Ying, she seemed to have something to say, but after opening her mouth, she hesitated. In the end, she followed him without saying a word. Not long after, the three of them arrived outside the Kunlun Palace. Someone on the side reported in, and soon after, Lord True Monarch Tianlan's decree was passed down, inviting them inside to meet. After passing through the thick and heavy palace door that was about 7 or 8 people tall, they arrived at the vast and magnificent main hall. 9 giant pillars supported the dome and were carved with clouds and mist-coiling dragons. In front of the main hall, on a tall white jade lotus throne, Lord True Monarch Tianlan was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, resting on his wide sleeves and shiny hair. When they raised their heads and looked up, that person was solemn, like a god, causing people to involuntarily feel a sense of reverence and worship. When Xue Ying and Old Ma arrived, they both wore deep and respectful expressions, prostrating long ago under the throne. Only Lu Chen glanced at the half-human half-god figure on the lotus throne, then turned his gaze away with an indifferent expression. He walked to the side of a stone pillar and carefully looked at the carvings on it. "Since you've come here, why don't you kneel before me?" A deep voice that sounded like thunder suddenly rang out in the palace, rumbling like thunder. It was as if a god was speaking, causing people to revere it. Xue Ying and Old Ma's bodies trembled slightly, their heads lowered even more, and there was a faint look of fear on their faces. For some reason, in this Kunlun Palace, Lord True Monarch Tianlan's aura was many times stronger than usual. Moreover, following his voice, the entire palace seemed to be resonating with him, as if this incomparably powerful true monarch had already become one with this towering and majestic palace, transforming into a true god, looking down on the insignificant ants of the human world. The only exception was probably Lu Chen. Perhaps he was a stubborn ant. In such a situation, Lu Chen did not seem to be affected by the true monarch's aura at all. He only waved his hand and did not even turn his head. There was even a hint of impatience in his tone as he said, "You haven't acknowledged me as your master yet. It won't be too late to kneel after you've acknowledged me as your master." On the lotus throne, Lord True Monarch Tianlan suddenly opened his eyes. At that moment, there seemed to be endless surging waves in the depths of his eyes, as if the world was spinning and there was a violent storm. He looked like a god or a demon. In the quiet palace, there seemed to be thunder and lightning exploding in the silence. The atmosphere was terrifying, as if it was about to freeze one's blood. After a moment, the terrifying demon-like light and shadow retracted into his eyes. Lord True Monarch Tianlan blinked and chuckled. "Oh, that's fine too." After casually asking a few questions, Lord True Monarch Tianlan ordered Shui Ying and Old Ma to leave first. After the two of them left the Kunlun Palace, they walked all the way to the side of the huge boulder with the words, Kunlun, carved on it. Only then did they both heave a sigh of relief, feeling the terrifying pressure that had been pressing down on their hearts slowly recede. The two of them looked at each other with reverence on their faces. Old Ma sighed and said with lingering fear, I don't know why, but every time I come here to have an audience with Lord True Monarch, I always feel uneasy. I'm especially reverent towards Lord True Monarch. Shui Ying seemed to have the same feeling. However, her cultivation was high and she was shrewd, so she quickly regained her composure. However, there was still a trace of anxiety in her eyes. She turned back to look at the palace. At the side, Old Ma coughed and said, Hallmaster, don't worry. Lu Chen is not a talkative person. He knows what he should say and what he shouldn't say. Shui Ying turned back to look at Old Ma and raised her eyebrows slightly. Really? Old Ma said frankly, I've known him for many years. Other than Lord True Monarch, there shouldn't be anyone in the world who knows him better than me. Shui Ying slowly nodded. Although she didn't say anything, her expression clearly showed that she was relieved. Old Ma secretly cursed in his heart. However, in the face of this powerful woman, he was not like Lu Chen. He was still tactful. He immediately changed the topic with a smile. Then, he hinted that before he came, he had already discussed it with Lu Chen and so on. What happened before was just a misunderstanding. Of course, it must be that Lu Chen's brain was stiff and he inexplicably misunderstood Hallmaster. In short, everything was that idiot Lu Chen's fault. Hallmaster, you don't have to worry. Shui Ying was very happy after hearing this. When she looked at Old Ma again, she immediately felt that he was more pleasing to the eye. She nodded slightly and said, I didn't realize before that you were also a capable person. If you have time in the future, come visit me more often. Perhaps I can be of help to you. Old Ma laughed and hurriedly cupped his hands in thanks. Then, the two of them talked and laughed harmoniously, looking like old friends who had known each other for many years. At the same time, in the solemn Kunlun Great Hall, Lord True Monarch Tianlan, who was sitting on the throne, glared angrily. He looked as terrifying as a demon god. He said to Lu Chen below, Hey, why are you so insensible? There were outsiders here just now. Why can't you give me some face? Bull*****. Lu Chen turned around rudely and looked at the damn baldy. He scolded, Didn't you tell me when I was young that the 9 dragons' Dharma bodies Tao, magic, and divine sense was a trick of a Jianghu swindler? Now you're actually using it? Lord True Monarch Tianlan coughed and said seriously, Later on, I found that this thing was quite useful, so I used it for a while. What's wrong with that? Lu Chen sneered and looked disdainful. Then he said angrily, You're too unkind. You said that you wanted to take me as your disciple and announced to the world that you would let me reach the heavens in a single step. But in fact, you're putting me on a fire to roast. You're probably afraid that I won't die, right? You still want me to respect you and bow down to you? Scram. Lu Chen looked very annoyed as he scolded the divine transformation realm True Monarch. Chapter 465. In today's Zhengxian Meng, Fuyunji could be said to be the most powerful hall, and this strength was not only in terms of combat power, but also in many other aspects. The most obvious one was the execution and efficiency of doing things. Overstaffed was basically the most appropriate description of the many halls in Zhengxian Meng. Many years of rule and ease had long made everyone lax. Anyway, the dirtiest, most tiring and most dangerous work was done by those idiots in Fuyunji. Wouldn't they be stupid if they didn't enjoy it? At the very most, they would just have to give in to the arrogant soldiers and valiant generals of the Floating Clouds Company. Furthermore, even if things got out of hand, everyone had their own backing. Was the Floating Clouds Company backed by perfected Lord Tianlan? I have one here too. In short, even if they quarreled at the end of the day, it was for the world's righteousness, justice, the overall situation of the righteous path and other more important things. Everyone would be fine if they each took a step back, as long as they didn't suffer any immediate losses. Therefore, for many years, probably only Fuyunji, who had foolishly fought with the most dangerous enemy, the devil cult, could still maintain that kind of bloody and sharp aura. Take this time, True Lord Tianlan's plan to hold a disciple ceremony for example. He had announced this to the public 3 days ago, But if the task of organizing this disciple ceremony was given to any other hall in Zhengxianmeng, not to mention 3 days, even if you gave them a month, they might still mess it up. Everyone would kick each other's balls and quarrel with each other. In addition, each of them would secretly take some money from these missions. After about 3 months, the budget would increase by 5 or 6 times, and it would be done. For Yunji was different. The group led by Shueying mobilized all the forces at hand and did their best. Then, everything was set up in 3 days, and according to true Lord Tianlan's instructions, they informed all the important people in Zhengxianmeng, big and small. After all, perfected Lord Tianlan's status was unquestionable. Moreover, his disciple recruitment this time round was akin to his direct line of descent, so he had to take him seriously. However, there were still some restraints in the process. If he really wanted to go all out, with perfected Lord Tianlan's identity, not only would he cause a stir in the Immortal City and the perfected Immortal Alliance, he would also cause a stir in the human cultivation world and countless sects and clans in the entire Divine Land. As long as he sent an invitation, they would probably all come. Of course, in this way, the time would be delayed for a long time. After all, China was so vast, and it would take time for people from remote places to come over, right? Shueying, who personally presided over and organized the apprenticeship ceremony, had even specifically consulted true Lord Tianlan about this matter. At first, true Lord Tianlan had hesitated because it seemed that this damn Baldy really wanted to hold a world-shaking ceremony. However, in the end, this matter was indeed too troublesome. Putting aside everything else, once the invitations were sent out, by the time the ceremony began, there would at least be an extra 100,000 cultivators in the Immortal City, right? At that time, how would they be managed? How would they be settled? These were all headache-inducing problems. Therefore, after discussing with Shueying, perfected Lord Tianlan gave up this somewhat unrealistic idea and decided to only invite his friends from the Immortal Alliance who were currently in the Immortal City to attend the ceremony. On this day, the entire Celestial Dragon Mountain and the huge Immortal City seemed to have fallen into a carnival atmosphere. Everywhere in Zhengxianmeng was decorated with lanterns and streamers. The usually solemn Kunlun Hall was also filled with a joyous atmosphere. Since early in the morning, there had been many cultivators walking around. At the same time, as time passed, more and more cultivators from Zhengxianmeng arrived. Everyone called out to their friends with smiles on their faces. Each of them looked harmonious and humorous. At the same time, they laughed and guessed who the luckiest person in the world was. What was his identity and origin? Why had they never heard of this person before? Who would have thought that the best seat in Zhengxianmeng that everyone had been longing for decades would actually be taken by this stranger? There were too many such things to count. At least, most people knew nothing about this young man called Lu Chen who suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Then, they felt jealousy and hatred towards him. Why didn't I encounter such a thing as a free lunch in the sky? That guy didn't do anything. He was unknown, but he gained the trust of a divine transformation stage perfected lord. Then he rose to the top in one step. Was there any fairness in this world? Why wasn't that person me? These were the thoughts and voices that lingered in the minds of many people. As for the real identity and origin of Lu Chen, no one actually tried to get to the bottom of it. If a divine transformation stage perfected lord took a fancy to you and accepted you as a disciple, of course there would be no problem. It was possible that their old man had lost his mind. However, as the strongest and youngest divine transformation stage perfected lord among the 6 perfected lords, although many people disliked him, no one had ever doubted his strength and judgment. Around noon, the most famous divine transformation stage perfected lords in Zhengxianmeng came leisurely on colorful clouds. Along the way, they were all high and mighty, looking down on the world, and looked extremely arrogant. Of course, they did have the capital to be arrogant. In the secular world, the people of Zhengxianmeng had always respected them and regarded them as half-human and half-god figures. Perfected Lord Tianlan personally came to the entrance of the main hall of Kunlun and bowed to these 5 old brothers. Everyone stood together. The 6 divine transformation stage perfected lords of Zhengxianmeng were awe-inspiring and powerful. Although they were just chatting, there was a large empty space around them. There was a faint sound of wind and thunder, which was awe-inspiring. After chatting for a while and receiving many sincere or fake congratulations, perfected Lord Tianlan, who was smiling, personally invited the 5 divine transformation stage perfected lords who had come to watch the ceremony and congratulate them into the main hall. After they went in, someone outside the house shouted, "The ceremony begins." The 6 perfected lords walked into the main hall and saw that both sides of the hall were already filled with people. There were 5 big chairs placed under the tall lotus throne in the center, and there were several rows of chairs behind it. The people sitting on the chairs were the real figures of Zhengxian Meng. They were under the 6 perfected lords and were the high-level cultivators who ruled over billions of lives in the vast land of the Divine Land. Further away were the cultivators of Zhengxian Meng who had almost come to watch the show. Most of them were standing, but there were also many good-looking figures among them. Obviously, there were also hidden dragons and crouching tigers. After a while, everyone sat down. Perfected Lord Tianlan returned to the lotus throne and his expression turned solemn. It could be said that he looked solemn and dignified, like a god. The people in the main hall immediately felt the powerful aura and quieted down, looking at him with some reverence. After a while someone sang, "Lu Chen has come to see you." The sound of footsteps was heard. Like a gust of wind, everyone, including the divine transformation stage perfected lords, looked back and saw a figure walking in from outside with steady steps. It was Lu Chen. At that moment, countless eyes fell on him. Some were like fire, some were like fire, some were like frost, some were like snow, some were as gentle as water, and some were as cold as knives. Lu Chen seemed not to feel anything around him. He walked all the way to the lotus throne. Contrary to his usual unruly manner, his expression was solemn and respectful. He actually quietly and honestly knelt on the ground, giving the person on the lotus throne enough face. He clearly kowtowed a few times, and then said in a voice that everyone in the main hall could hear, "Disciple Lu Chen pays respect to master." After saying that, he lowered his body and closed his eyes slightly. When his face was close to the ground and he felt the coldness of the stones on the ground, for some reason, Lu Chen suddenly remembered that day many years ago, in a deserted and dirty corner. He also knelt in front of the same person and called out the 2 words, "Master." Suddenly, decades passed in the blink of an eye. The child of that year had grown up. And at this moment, was his heart as pious as it was back then? He closed his eyes, letting all the light disappear into the depths of his pupils. Chapter 466. Good, get up. Lord Tianlan, who was sitting on the lotus throne, smiled and looked at Lu Chen as he stood up. He nodded slightly, as if he was very satisfied with this disciple he had just accepted. What followed next was the usual procedure of acknowledging a master as a disciple. The only difference was that some people simply kowtowed 3 times. However, since Supreme Lord Tianlan had made such a big scene, he naturally had to do it from the beginning to the end. There was even someone who was singing at the side. Moreover, this person had a high status and was very eye-catching. It was the Floating Clouds Division's hallmaster, Xue Ying. During the ceremony, Lu Chen's eyes inadvertently swept across the crowd next to him. Other than the 5 prominent perfected gods in the front row, there was a group of people standing in the front row, and many of them were familiar faces. That was where the members of the Kunlun party were gathered. Lord Tianlan's current status in the Kunlun party was self-evident. It would not be an exaggeration to say that he was a leading figure. It was only because he did not want to be too troublesome. Otherwise, with his status, if he accepted a disciple, the Kunlun party's sect leader, Yuanying perfected persons, except those who were in seclusion, and those who had some status above the Jindan realm would have to come, even if they were thousands of miles away. At this moment, Lu Chen looked over and saw that many people from the Kunlun party had a strange expression on their faces. Standing at the front, other than Masato Kahara and a few other Yuanying perfected persons, the outstanding-looking Su Qingjun was also standing there, staring at Lu Chen with a somewhat complicated expression. Their eyes met for a moment, then Su Qingjun quietly looked away. And at the back of all the people, there was still one person standing there silently. He was young, handsome, in his prime, and talented. He was a proud son of heaven. Among his peers, he had high hopes from his elders and was respected by his peers. Other than Su Qingjun, there was almost no one else who could be compared to him. He was He had thought that the person in the limelight was him. For this, he had even betrayed his own master and worked hard for the person on the lotus throne, risking his life for his great cause. He had thought that everything was his. Until today, when he saw Lu Chen standing in the crowd. His eyes had been fixed on the person who had stolen everything from him. If his eyes could turn into a blade, he would have cut him into pieces and turned his bones into ashes. But the fact was that he could not get what he wanted, so he could only desperately suppress himself. His hatred, jealousy, and anger turned into sharp blades that could not hurt others, but were cutting himself. He did not even dare to raise his head to look at the lofty perfected Lord Tianlan, because he was afraid that a single glance would expose his hatred and alarm that person. In that case, what awaited him might be a tragic death. Why does such a person exist in this world? He thought fiercely in his heart. He stared at Lu Chen and unsurprisingly recognized him. He remembered that he was the one who had forced Lu Chen into the Dragon River in the Land of Chaos. But in just a few years, he had become perfected Lord Tianlan's direct disciple? Perhaps he would inherit his legacy in the future? And then steal everything from him? So all of you were lying to me, he slowly said in his heart, word by word. After the disciple acceptance ceremony was over, Shuang turned to perfected Lord Tianlan with a questioning look in her eyes. Perfected Lord Tianlan nodded. He floated down from the lotus throne and landed beside Lu Chen. His expression was solemn, but he held Lu Chen's right hand and said loudly, "From today onwards, I will give you the Taoist name Tian and the name Ying." As he spoke, he looked around and pointed to the sky and then to the ground with a solemn expression. Heaven and earth Kunlun, passed down from generation to generation. Lu Chen knelt down in front of him again and kowtowed. One person in each generation. Heaven will never be extinguished. Perfected Lord Tianlan laughed and helped Lu Chen up. At this time, the divine transformation realm perfected lords who were watching the ceremony also stood up with a smile. The huge hall of Kunlun was filled with clamor. Countless gazes of envy, joy, and jealousy were looking at Lu Chen. Perfected Lord Tianlan pulled Lu Chen to the front row and introduced his disciple to the 5 high and mighty divine transformation realm perfected lords one by one. The 5 of them smiled and agreed. Then, they each took out a gift for Lu Chen. Lu Chen wore a smile and a respectful expression, looking like the most honest and humble young man. He greeted the 5 seniors with a smile and flattered them before accepting the gifts one by one. With the help of the divine transformation realm perfected lords, Lu Chen's current identity was completely different. Not only was he a disciple of perfected Lord Tianlan, he had also obtained the inheritance of the Heaven Dao name that perfected Lord Tianlan had announced to the world. Almost all the cultivators present knew what this meant. In the thousands of years of history of the Kunlun party, almost all the people who inherited this Dao name would become influential figures in the future. Out of 10, 70 to 80% of them would become the sect leader of the Kunlun party, which was much more important than the personal disciples of ordinary sections. Therefore, these divine transformation realm perfected lords should have also understood the reason behind this. Or perhaps they were giving face to perfected Lord Tianlan, who was currently at the peak of his power. The gifts they gave were truly extraordinary. Although they could not be said to be at the level of the extremely rare heavenly treasures, they were all exquisite and precious items that made people drool. One must know that they were basically giving them away for free. As the gifts appeared one after another and were accepted by Lu Chen without the slightest hesitation with a damned humble smile, the praises from the crowd could be said to come wave after wave, and the gazes of envy, jealousy, and hatred were like rolling waves. Of course, there was also he among them, but basically, there was only a bone-deep hatred left. After meeting the 5 divine transformation stage perfected cultivators, perfected Lord Tianlan actually went through the trouble of leading Lu Chen to the seats of the perfected cultivators 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 of the Perfected Cultivator Alliance. This caused another uproar, and also let everyone see once again how much perfected Lord Tianlan doted on this disciple. In the future, if there were conflicts in daily life, they would probably give in to Lu Chen a little more. Well, by the way, don't think that you don't need to give a gift just because you are Yuanying Realm Perfected Lord. Lu Chen still had a smile on his face, and his expression was gentle. When he was pulled around by his master Perfected Lord Tianlan to greet the smiling seniors around him, his etiquette was simply impeccable. Except for a certain gap in the middle, when he seemed to maintain a smile while gently gritting his teeth, and said in a low voice that only Perfected Lord Tianlan could hear, "I say, don't go too far. These people have never thought of giving you a gift, okay?" Perfected Lord Tianlan seemed to have not heard him at all. With a smile on his face, he continued to pull Lu Chen forward as if he had not heard him. At the same time, he said in a low voice without batting an eyelid, "Are you stupid? I will only accept you as my disciple in my life. If I don't accept more, how can I face myself?" Lu Chen. Chapter 467. Lu Chen, come and greet Perfected Long Tai. Perfected Lord Tianlan pulled Lu Chen to a square-faced and majestic Yuanying Perfected Master. He first smiled and nodded at Perfected Long Tai. Perfected Long Tai didn't dare to be rude to him and hurriedly bowed with a smile. Perfected Lord Tianlan then turned to Lu Chen and said, "Perfected Long Tai is a famous figure in Zhengxianmeng. In the Heavenly Law Hall. He is the most upright person and has always been respected by his peers." This was a praise from a famous soul formation Perfected Lord, who could even be considered the #1 person in Zhengxianmeng. Even though Perfected Long Tai wasn't on the same side as Fuyunji, he couldn't help but smile and thank him profusely. Lu Chen walked over obediently and greeted him with the etiquette of a junior. Then, he respectfully called Perfected Lord Tianlan martial uncle. Perfected Long Tai was delighted at first and then shocked. He hurriedly shook his head and said, "Nephew, you can't do this. I don't dare to be on the same level as Perfected Lord. In the past, I've always done the etiquette of a junior. How can I go overboard today?" Perfected Lord Tianlan didn't care and laughed. "He's a young man. It's only right for him to respect you as a senior. Today is a joyous day. Long Tai, you don't have to worry about it." Ha ha ha. Perfected Lord Tianlan's laughter was hearty and righteous. Instantly, it attracted a wave of flattery. They all said that Perfected Lord Tianlan was broad-minded and had an imposing appearance. Perfected Long Tai couldn't help but nod and laugh. Then, his gaze fell on Lu Chen. He nodded and said seriously, "I see that nephew Lu Chen is talented and outstanding. You're truly a dragon among men. In the future, I will study hard and train hard under you. In time, I will definitely become a hero of my righteous Tao Immortal Alliance." As he spoke, he reached into his clothes and took out a jade bottle with a 5-petal red plum drawn on it. Under everyone's gaze, Perfected Long Tai's eyes flashed with a hint of pain. But then, his expression returned to normal. He stuffed the jade bottle into Lu Chen's hand and smiled. "This is a superior-grade spirit pill called Red Plum. It's most effective for meridian and internal injuries. As long as your heart isn't completely shattered, taking this pill will save your life. It'll be a little more protection when you roam the pugilistic world." The crowd in Kunlun Palace was stirred. Many knew how precious the Red Plum spirit pill was, but almost no one expected it to be Long Tai Lan to be so generous. Earlier on, when Perfected Lord Tianlan brought Lu Chen to meet a few nascent soul-perfected beings, the gifts they gave were considered ordinary. Of course, this was only for perfected Yuanying. At least for ordinary cultivators, the gifts from those Yuanying perfected lords were already precious. Looking at the red plum spirit pill in his hand, Lu Chen was shocked. He looked a little uneasy and didn't dare to accept it directly. Instead, he turned to look at Perfected Lord Tian. However, what kind of person was Perfected Lord Tianlan? With one look, he could tell that the kid was gripping the jade bottle tightly and had no intention of letting go. Perfected Lord Tian coughed and clapped his hands. "Lu Chen, why aren't you thanking Perfected Long Tai for his kindness? In the future, all of us will be in the true Immortal Alliance, and we will be one family. Today, we have formed a relationship, and there will be karma in the future. You must remember this in your heart." As he spoke, he even smiled and reached out to pat enlightened Long Tai's shoulder, nodding to him. Lu Chen nodded and bowed to Perfected Long Tai solemnly. "Thank you, Uncle Master." A trace of joy flashed across Perfected Long Tai's eyes as he nodded with a smile. It was only then that the people at the side came to their senses and thought, "So that's what's going on." Perfected Lord Tianlan is a powerful and prestigious Perfected Lord of the Soul Formation realm. If he were to give out an ordinary gift, wouldn't it be akin to slapping Perfected Lord Tianlan in the face if it was a slightly lower grade gift? "I'm holding a disciple recruitment ceremony. On such an important and solemn occasion, you brought a broken thing over. Are you trying to disgust me? Are you looking down on me? Are you going to slap my face? Are you dissatisfied with a divine transformation stage Perfected Lord like me? Or do you want to go against me?" F***CK. There was no way to think about what happened next. It was supposed to be a joyous day. They happily came to the palace of Kunlun to congratulate perfected Lord Tian Tian and form a bond with a divine transformation stage perfected Lord. But if they gave too little gift, wouldn't the bond become an enemy? Who would have thought that perfected Long Tai, who usually looked old-fashioned and upright, would think deeper than everyone else today? For a moment, everyone looked at perfected Long Tai differently. Perfected Long Tai, on the other hand, revealed a pleased expression as he took a step back and stood among the crowd. After a while, many people present thought of another matter. It was a few nascent soul-perfected ones with relatively ordinary gifts that perfected Lord Tianlan brought Lu Chen to see just now. Sure enough, at a glance, the 3 or 4 nascent soul-stage Taoist masters all looked extremely ugly. Their faces were green and white. Among them, there was an impatient one who was already glaring at Taoist Master Long Tai angrily, looking like he was gnashing his teeth. Perfected Long Tai didn't care about this at all. He didn't even bother to look at them. Was this a joke? That was an outstanding peak perfected lord. His influence was so great that no one in Zhengxianmeng could compare to him. Instead of forming a bond, they would offend him? Go to hell. Compared to that, offending you Yuanying perfected lords is nothing. Anyway, everyone was in the Yuanying realm. Who's afraid of who? With Taoist Master Long Tai's good start, the situation immediately changed. Wherever perfected Lord Tian Tian and Lu Chen went, there would be cheers and laughter. Come, Lu Chen, this is perfected Meng Shan. Greetings, Martial Uncle Meng Shan. Ha 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 ha, no need to be so courteous. Sigh. Nephew Lu Chen has an excellent aptitude. Congratulations to perfected Lord for getting such a good disciple. This is the first time we meet. I have a treasure called Ice Crystal Stone. It came from a 10,000-year-old ice cap. It is a rare item. Please accept it. Lu Chen, come over. Greetings, perfected Huang Tan. Greetings, Martial Uncle Huang Tan. Ha 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 ha. Nephew need not be so courteous. TSK. Nephew Lu Chen is young and handsome. Now you are married. Ha ha, young man, don't say a few words and I will be embarrassed. Come, this is the first time we meet. This King Wu hook that can cut through gold and jade is a greeting gift. Come, this is perfected Tong Shan. Ha ha ha, this is perfected Yen Zhao. Come quickly, Lu Chen, come and greet this person. She is not an ordinary person, she is the famous celestial Chui Wei. Oh, and this is perfected by Sha. In the end, the people of the Floating Clouds office were the ones who were smart. Shui Ying made a gesture without batting an eyelid. Old Ma, who was beside her, ran over like a wisp of smoke. He held an extremely large and solemn red wooden tray in his hand, and began following Lu Chen and True Lord Tianlan step by step. Lu Chen took one and put another on the wooden plate. There was no other way. He couldn't just put it into the tree hole in front of everyone, right? Therefore, he could only trouble old Ma to carry the plate. Furthermore, one plate could not fit all of them. After all, there were big and small treasures. After filling it up, old Ma ran back and put it away. Then, he took another plate and ran over. For a moment, he attracted the attention of many people. Why did it seem like Fu Yunji's preparations were very thorough? Chapter 468. Unknowingly, the atmosphere in the main hall of the Kunlun slowly became a little strange. Most of the people who could stand here today were cultivators with status or roots in Zhengxianmeng. Since they had status in Zhengxianmeng, they were also a group of elites in the vast land of Shenzhou. Most of the people who could reach such a position were smart people, and some things could naturally be seen by those who were observant. However, most of the people seemed to be unaware of this. Everyone was amiable and polite. Wherever perfected Lord Tianlan and Lu Chen went, there was a sea of joy and flattery. Only the 5 big shots who were also perfected lords of the divine transformation realm behind them had a slightly different expression from the rest. Some frowned slightly, some smiled with slight disdain, and of course, there were also some who seemed to be smiling as if they could not help laughing. After walking around like this, perfected Lord Tianlan brought Lu Chen to meet a large number of Yuanying Zenrens. Old Ma, who was following behind, received gifts until his hands were sore, but he was unusually excited. This guy had probably never seen so many rare treasures in his life, and his eyes were almost dazzled. Seeing that there was only one last group of people left, When Perfected Lord Tianlan led Lu Chen to that side, he did not stop in front of the few Yuanying Zenrens in front of the crowd this time. Instead, he nodded at them with a smile and walked forward. The people next to him were stunned, but after taking a closer look at the crowd, they came to their senses. It turned out that the people standing there were all people from the Kunlun party. It seemed that Perfected Lord Tianlan was a little embarrassed to attack his own people after all. After seeing Perfected Lord Tianlan's action, the few Yuanying Zenrens of the Kunlun party were obviously relieved and a smile appeared on their faces. After all, they were from the same sect as Perfected Lord Tianlan. If Perfected Lord Tianlan really brought Lu Chen to meet them, not only would they have to give him a greeting gift, but because of this relationship, they would most likely give him a better gift than the others. Seeing that things were as such, Perfected Lord Tianlan was about to walk past the Zenrens of the Kunlun party with Lu Chen. Unexpectedly, at this moment Lu Chen, who had been quietly following behind Perfected Lord Tianlan and had never overstepped the rules for so long, suddenly turned around and actually left Perfected Lord Tianlan behind. He took a few steps forward and bowed to one of the few Yuanying Zenrens of the Kunlun party. With a smile on his face, he said very politely and respectfully, "Greetings, Uncle Master." There was a sudden commotion in the crowd. Many gazes looked over curiously, including Perfected Lord Tianlan who was walking in front, who also looked back in surprise. At the end of everyone's line of sight, the person who stood in front of Lu Chen with a stunned expression was Masato Kahara of the Kunlun party. In the crowd, Su Qingjun, who was originally standing behind Masato Kahara with a slightly complicated expression, suddenly saw Lu Chen like this. For a moment, she was also a little surprised and subconsciously took a step forward. Although Masato Kahara was stunned, she was after all a Zhenren of the Yuanying Zhenren who had cultivated for many years. She had both bearing and experience, so she quickly adjusted herself and laughed. She quickly reached out to help Lu Chen up and said with a smile, "Brother Lu, you can't do this. Usually, when I see your master in the same sect, I also greet him as a junior and call him Uncle Master. From now on, you and I can just treat each other as equals." Lu Chen smiled and nodded. Perfected Lord Tianlan, who was next to him, walked over. He did not seem to be angry, but found it a little funny. Perhaps he was thinking to himself, "Is this guy actually more cunning than me? He even dares to lay his hands on his own people." At the same time, he was also a little curious as to why this disciple of his did not look for anyone else but this Masato Kihara. One must know that in this hall today, the Uncle Master that Lu Chen called out was the most valuable. After half a day, who knew how many treasures he had swindled? Many people understood this logic. Of course, Masato Kahara could also see it. For a moment, his face was a little bitter and he laughed dryly. At this moment, he naturally recognized Lu Chen's appearance. Back then outside Su Qingjuan's cave abode, he had also come into contact with Lu Chen. Therefore, he leaned forward slightly and his expression did not change. However, he lowered his voice and said, "Little Lu, on this big day of yours, why are you staring at me instead of others?" Su Qingjun stood beside her master and heard this sentence clearly. She frowned slightly and looked at Lu Chen with some unfriendliness, as if there was a little anger. Lu Chen also lowered his head slightly and then said in a low voice, "Uncle Master, that year outside the Qingjun sect, you promised to give me something. You haven't given it to me yet." Apart from Su Qingjun, there was also Perfected Lord Tianlan who heard this conversation. At this moment, he raised his brows slightly and looked as if he was going to scold Lu Chen and take him away. Suddenly, he steadied himself and then looked at Masato Kahara with a smile that was not a smile. His smile was full of playfulness. Sweat immediately dripped down Masato Kahara's face. Standing at the side, Su Qingjun was also stunned for a moment. Then, as if she thought of something, the corners of her mouth twitched and she seemed to almost laugh out loud. However, she immediately came to her senses and immediately held back her laughter. When she looked at Lu Chen again, she found that he was also looking at her, intentionally or unintentionally. Their gazes met in mid-air. Su Qingjun gently gritted her teeth, glared at him, and then turned her head away. After a moment, Masato Kahara coughed and laughed. "Brother Lu is too polite. Today is your big day. With a famous teacher like Uncle Master Tianlan, your future is boundless. You will definitely be the pillar of the new generation of our Kunlun party." As he said this, He paused for a moment and stretched out a hand to touch his body. The surrounding crowd immediately burst into laughter. It wasn't entirely out of mockery. It was just that this matter seemed rather amusing. However, it was obvious that Masato Kahara was a little unprepared for the current situation. Although he had said the polite words, when his hand touched his body, his movements were slow. It seemed that he had not thought about what gift to give. Outsiders might not understand, but most people in the Kunlun party knew that Masato Kahara was born in Tieji, and his resources were not as rich as the Kunlun party. It was only in recent years that he clung to the thigh of perfected Lord Tianlan that his life slowly got better. But it was also because of this that he could not show his timidity when perfected Lord Tianlan was looking at him with a faint smile. Just as he was cursing Lu Chen in his heart and was about to bleed with heartache, suddenly, Su Qingjun beside him took a step forward and put a small box in his hand. Masato Kahara was shocked. Before he could react, he heard Su Qingjun say calmly, "This is the famous tea little crane. It is unique to the family of Kunlun Mountain's tea-growing family. It can calm the mind and is quite effective for cultivating qi. There is only a small amount produced every year, and it is only given to those who are fated." After saying that, she did not look at Lu Chen. She lowered her eyes and took a step back, standing behind Masato Kahara again. Family little crane. The smile on Lu Chen's face suddenly disappeared. After a while, he suddenly sighed softly and muttered to himself in a low voice, "Are we fated?" He shook his head and his expression suddenly seemed a little bleak. He then took the tea from the startled Masato Kahara's hand, bowed to him solemnly, and turned to walk forward. Perfected Lord Tianlan smiled slightly and also turned to leave. Behind him, Su Qingjuan's bright eyes glimmered with a trace of pain and gentleness. She quietly glanced at Lu Chen's back. Chapter 469. This clamorous and lively disciple acceptance ceremony that shook the entire immortal city finally came to an end before dusk arrived. Everyone left with a satisfied and joyful smile, walking out of the majestic Kunlun Hall and dispersing in all directions. When night fell, the Kunlun Hall finally regained its silence. Looking out from the hall and through the door, one could see a bright moon slowly rising, radiating a bright and gentle light that shone on the mortal world. At this moment, there were only 2 people left in the huge hall. When there was no one around, perfected Lord Tianlan casually sat on the ground, gazing at the bright moon in the distant night sky with a deep gaze. Beside him, Lu Chen also sat quietly, but he did not look at the moonlight outside. Instead, he was staring at an unknown dark corner in the hall, lost in thought. Not far behind the 2 of them, under the white lotus throne, on the tall and wide wooden table, all kinds of rare treasures were piled up like a mountain, to the point that the table could no longer hold them all. They slid down like worthless sand and piled up around the table, forming a treasure mountain that could make most cultivators in the world go crazy with envy. However, the 2 of them did not seem to be among the majority of the cultivators, because from the beginning to the end, perfected Lord Tianlan and Lu Chen did not look back at the treasure mountain. This silence lasted for a long time. Suddenly, at a certain moment, Lu Chen broke the silence and said, "Hey, let me ask you something." Perfected Lord Tianlan replied with a "Hmm." Lu Chen said, "Did you want to take me in as your disciple when you took me in and nurtured me when I was young?" Perfected Lord Tianlan retracted his gaze from the moonlight and turned to look at Lu Chen, saying, "No." Lu Chen asked, "Why?" Perfected Lord Tianlan said calmly, "What you wanted to do back then was too dangerous. Even I couldn't guarantee your safety. Moreover, it seemed that after you sneaked into the devil cult, you would most likely die. So, you see, I can't possibly place all my hopes on a person who can die at any time, right?" Lu Chen sighed and said, "In any case, today is the first day I formally acknowledged you as my master. You don't have to be so straightforward with your words." Perfected Lord Tianlan smiled warmly and said, "Apart from being with you all these years, it's rare for me to be able to speak freely. I'll take this opportunity to say a few more words. I'm delighted to see you suffer." Lu Chen rolled his eyes and said grumpily, "You are a famous divine transformation stage perfected cultivator. Why are you acting like a resentful woman? Do you have to do this?" Perfected Lord Tianlan burst into laughter and looked delighted. When Supreme Tianlan's laughter stopped, Lu Chen looked at him and said, "Well, no matter what, I've taken you as my master. What do you need me to do next?" Perfected Lord Tianlan's eyes flickered as if he was curious. He looked at his disciple with a smile and said, "That's strange. If other people were to become a disciple of a divine transformation stage perfected cultivator, needless to say, the first thing they would do would be to obtain various cultivation resources from their master and cultivate to their heart's content. It would take at least a few years, and at most a dozen years. If they don't improve their cultivation to the Jin Dan Yuanying realm, they would be too embarrassed to tell others that they are the disciple of a divine transformation stage perfected cultivator. Why is it that when it comes to you, you don't even think about cultivation and the first thing you want to do is to help me?" Lu Chen's expression was indifferent and did not seem to be affected. He said, "That's for others. The situation is different. You are not those other perfected cultivators, and I am not those people." Perfected Lord Tianlan stared at him for a moment and then nodded. He seemed to be a little emotional, but he did not dwell on this matter. Then he asked calmly, "Then can I trust you completely, Tianing?" Lu Chen sat where he was and didn't answer immediately. His expression was a little strange. He didn't know if it was because of the sudden call, or if it was because of the high and mighty person in front of him saying the word, "believe." After a long time, Lu Chen raised his head and met Perfected Lord Tianlan's gaze. He nodded and said calmly, "Sure." He said calmly, "You can trust me. The Kunlun party has dispatched many people recently. Almost all of them have arrived at Immortal City." In the quiet hall of Kunlun, Perfected Lord Tianlan and Lu Chen sat side by side. Their voices were so soft that only the two of them could hear them. This group of people includes the other experts of the Kunlun party. Together with Fuyunji, they are the two strongest forces under me. If I want to do something big, I must integrate these two forces. Perfected Lord Tianlan looked at Lu Chen and said, "But it is not that easy. Although both sides listen to me, it will be troublesome to integrate them. Xue Ying is very capable, but the Kunlun party is very biased and may not be willing to submit to her. So I need someone to mediate between them, and this person is none other than you." Lu Chen nodded silently. He had no objections to this. Regardless of anything else, he was the only disciple and successor of Perfected Lord Tianlan. This was enough for the experts of the Kunlun party to acknowledge him. Moreover, he had been in the shadow of Fuyunji for at least 20 years. He was very familiar with Fuyunji. Therefore, Lu Chen did not reject this. He nodded and said, "Okay, I will do my best." When Perfected Lord Tianlan saw that he promised so readily, a hint of gratification flashed across his face. He nodded and said, "Don't worry, when it's time to support you, I'll definitely do so. Also, I won't treat you badly. At the very least, I'll let you have the strength to fight against a nascent soul-perfected master." Lu Chen smiled and suddenly asked, "Can I trust you?" Perfected Lord Tianlan was stunned. "Of course. Why do you suddenly ask this?" Lu Chen looked into his eyes and said, "Then you said you wanted to do something big. What is it?" Perfected Lord Tianlan said without hesitation, "You know me. For so many years, my top priority has been to completely annihilate the devil cult. Therefore, your next task is to mediate between the two parties. You will command and pursue the remaining members of the devil cult and try to completely destroy this tumor." Lu Chen nodded and said, "I understand. What else?" Perfected Lord Tianlan looked at him for a while and suddenly smiled. "What else? What are you referring to?" Lu Chen did not smile. He only looked at him quietly. The bright moon outside the hall finally rose into the night sky. The shadows on the ground gradually became shorter and blurred. The mountain of treasures behind them also quietly disappeared into the darkness. The surrounding was silent. The smile on Perfected Lord Tianlan's face gradually disappeared. He looked at Lu Chen indifferently. His gaze gradually turned from gentle to deep and boundless, like the ocean with faint waves rising and falling. "Why do you ask me this?" When Perfected Lord Tianlan spoke again, his voice was still deep and thick. However, there seemed to be a hint of thunder in it. Chapter 470. The hall was silent for a long time until Lu Chen's voice rang out. "I've been in the devil cult for too long and I know them better than anyone else. Although the devil cult has a great reputation and is very ferocious, and there are still some demonic remnants appearing from time to time, but after the Battle of the Desolate Valley more than 10 years ago, they have more or less collapsed." Collapsed? But don't forget that Elder Ghost is still on the run. Even though we have annihilated their lair in the Immortal City Underground Palace a few days ago, he still escaped. Perfected Lord Tianlan asked. Lu Chen said indifferently, he alone is useless. In history, the devil cult had countless even more outstanding geniuses, but in the end, they still inevitably weakened. This is not the key point. Oh, then what is the key point? Tell me. Perfected Lord Tianlan seemed to be interested, and his gaze became calmer. There was even a hint of admiration in his eyes. These complicated and intertwined emotions made him look like a terrifying dragon that was constantly changing its expression. He was hard to fathom. Lu Chen was probably the only person in this world who could speak bluntly in front of this dragon. Or perhaps it was because he strangely maintained an inexplicable calmness. Their foundation has been destroyed. Perfected Lord Tianlan's eyes flickered. What foundation? People. Lu Chen said calmly. The key to the devil cult spreading its teachings and absorbing new blood to expand and strengthen is that they need many new people, which is the countless ordinary people in the world. As long as there are people who believe in their nonsense, then no matter what kind of setbacks the devil cult encounters, there will be a day where they will rise again. Perfected Lord Tianlan nodded. Indeed. In the past, there were some peerless geniuses in the world's righteous path who almost annihilated the devil cult. But as time passed, these evildoers could always rise again. Since the devil cult is so difficult to destroy, why are you so sure now? Because there has never been a Zhengxian Meng before. Lu Chen looked at him and said, in the past, no matter how powerful the geniuses of the righteous path were, they were just people who defied the natural order. At most, they had the power of a sect or sect. But now, Zhengxian Meng controls the cultivation world and his influence covers the whole world. Almost everyone is under the control of the Immortal Alliance. As time goes by, everyone will hear what Zhengxian Meng has announced. They will know that the nonsense of the devil cult cannot be trusted, and it will be harder for them to recruit new blood. Perfected Lord Tianlan laughed. Lu Chen sighed and said, so what if there's Elder Gui? They're still facing a dead end in the end. There's no way out. We're destined to perish. Perfected Lord Tianlan patted his knee gently, looking somewhat relieved. Thank you for your auspicious words. I hope so. Lu Chen was silent for a moment and said, this is the general trend and it won't change anymore. It's just that many people don't understand the devil cult well, so they haven't reacted yet. He raised his head and looked at Perfected Lord Tianlan. However, you're different. Just like me, you've been dealing with this bunch of monster incarnates for decades. I'm sure you'll be able to understand what I can see as well. So I find it strange that the devil cult is just a facade now. You don't need to mobilize a large number of experts from the Kunlun party to help at all. Just the power of Fuyunji alone is enough to destroy them. Perfected Lord Tianlan thought for a moment and said, what you said makes some sense. Lu Chen said, so other than the devil cult, what else do you want to do? At this moment, his expression was unusually serious. He frowned and said, I once infiltrated the devil cult and risked my life for you. I helped you do things and risked my life for you. This is nothing. But I want to know what exactly you want to do? When Perfected Lord Tianlan heard the first sentence, his expression was still a little uncertain. However, when he heard the words of risking his life, his body trembled slightly, as if his heart had been touched. His gaze slowly turned gentle. After a while, he waved his hand lightly. Lu Chen immediately stood up and walked to his side with light footsteps. He then squatted down quietly. Perfected Lord Tianlan started to whisper in his ear. His voice was so low that only Lu Chen could hear it. He listened quietly and remained expressionless from the beginning to the end. The moonlight outside the hall finally moved out of this place, leaving behind complete darkness that was as deep as the sea. Since the birth of Zhengxian Meng, there was probably no one like Lu Chen, who suddenly rose to the sky in one night. From an unknown person, he suddenly rose to the clouds and became an influential person with great power. Of course, this power came from the huge backing of Perfected Lord Tianlan. But it was also because of Perfected Lord Tianlan's strong and determined attitude that he directly gave Lu Chen incredible power. It showed that he valued this disciple very much and was determined to cultivate him with all his strength. In fact, Lu Chen became the leader of the experts dispatched from the Kunlun party. He was also responsible for negotiating with Xue Ying, the famous hallmaster of Fuyunji, about the arrangement of the two parties' forces. At the same time, he also began to intervene in everything related to the devil cult. He could ask about anything related to the devil cult. These two appointments alone were enough to make Lu Chen one of the most popular upstarts in Zhengxianmeng. At the same time, he also controlled an unimaginably huge amount of resources in Zhengxianmeng. No one dared to take him lightly. Because now, whenever Lu Chen went out and introduced himself, he would say with great emotion, "I am Lu Chen, Taoist name Tianying." What? You don't care about Tianying? Then can you please go and talk to perfected Lord Tianlan? There were too many smart people in Zhengxianmeng. They had sharp eyes and could see the situation clearly. Everyone could see that perfected Lord Tianlan, who was the most powerful person in Zhengxianmeng, probably really wanted to cultivate his new disciple this time. As for the other big shots under his command who had already been famous for many years, Thousand Lantern Immortal was far away in Kunlun as the sect leader immortal and was out of his reach. Xue Ying was in charge of Fuyunji and had great power. However, she had suffered a heavy setback from the devil cult a few days ago. The outside world was saying that perfected Lord Tianlan was dissatisfied with her. Besides, you are just a subordinate. How can you be compared with Lu Chen, a direct disciple with an inherited Taoist name? Perhaps Xue Ying herself had also recognized this reality. So when Lu Chen came to her and asked for the dozen devil cult captives he had captured in the underground palace, Xue Ying agreed without hesitation. Even though it was Fuyunji's biggest responsibility to interrogate and deal with the devil cult for the past few decades. Her straightforwardness even surprised Lu Chen a little. But Lu Chen did not care too much. In fact, he just came to Fuyunji for a trip. For many years, the prison of Fuyunji had been the safest place to imprison dangerous members of the devil cult. For so many years, no one had ever escaped. So Lu Chen did not want to cause trouble. Outside the prison of Fuyunji, while waiting for those people in front to go through the complicated and tedious procedures to open the door, Lu Chen looked back and saw a man and a woman following behind him. The man was still Old Ma, but the woman was not White Lotus who had been with them for the past few days. Instead, it was Su Qingjun. At this moment, Su Qingjun did not have much of an expression on her face, but when she occasionally looked at Lu Chen, her eyes were a little complicated. She probably grew up in a quiet and peaceful environment of an aristocratic family, and had never seen a man like him who insisted on using power to transfer her here. However, at this time, Lu Chen did not look at her. Instead, he frowned slightly, as if remembering something. He asked Old Ma in a low voice, "Where is White Lotus? Why haven't I seen her recently?" Old Ma shook his head and said, "I don't know either. It seems that since that day at Horse Washing Bridge, she has been hiding from us and refused to come over." Lu Chen was silent for a moment and said in a low voice, "Is she angry?" Chapter 471. Why is she angry? The one who asked this question was Su Qingjun, who had been standing silently at the side. She was from the Kunlun party and had met White Lotus before. Although she had just arrived in Immortal City and did not know much about the entanglement between White Lotus, Lu Chen, and Old Ma in the past, she heard that Lu Chen and Old Ma's words were a little strange. She was also a smart and sensitive woman, so she asked directly. Lu Chen was stunned and did not know what to say for a moment. He looked at Old Ma. Old Ma also shrugged and turned his head, obviously not wanting to answer this question. Lu Chen was a little helpless. After thinking for a moment, he whispered to Su Qingjun, "Old Ma and I guessed it privately. She probably thought that she would become the bald head's disciple." Old Ma stood at the side and listened. Suddenly, his heart moved slightly, and he glanced at Lu Chen. In the words just now, it seemed inconspicuous, but Old Ma and Lu Chen had been together for many years, so he still heard something strange in it. For many years, Lu Chen had called perfected Lord Tianlan damn bald head, behind his back. But now the word die was quietly missing. Su Qingjun naturally did not notice this, but she was still surprised by Lu Chen's words. She said in astonishment, "Wasn't White Lotus the disciple of Hakushin Jinkun? Why would she think of?" Lu Chen shook his head and said, "Not everyone thinks the same as you." With that, he roughly told Su Qingjun about what had happened to White Lotus these days. After listening, Su Qingjun was silent at first, and then she shook her head gently with some pity on her face. She said, "It seems that White Lotus is a little pitiful. At a young age, Her master unfortunately passed away before she succeeded in her cultivation. Now she has been taken to stay with martial granduncle Tianlan. Maybe she just wants to find someone to rely on. Pitiful? Lu Chen seemed to disagree with Su Qingjuan's comment. He said, "That little girl is much more powerful than you think. Don't underestimate her, and don't sympathize with her. Otherwise, you will suffer a big loss in the future." Su Qingjun glanced at Lu Chen with slight surprise and said, "What's wrong with you? You're actually so harsh to a little girl?" Lu Chen was speechless for a moment. It was no wonder that Su Qingjun would behave like this. Indeed, when White Lotus was on Kunlun Mountain in the past, except in front of him, she would show a fierce side. In front of others, she was quiet and peaceful. It seemed that she had really deceived a lot of people. At this time, the door of the prison in front of them opened. Lu Chen did not want to continue on this topic, so he greeted them and walked inside. Su Qingjun seemed to be a little concerned about the relationship between Lu Chen and White Lotus. It seemed that she wanted to say something more. When she took a few steps forward, she suddenly saw Lu Chen turn back and suddenly smile at her. His smile was a little strange. Su Qingjun was a little surprised and said, "Why do you look at me like this?" Lu Chen said with a smile, "I thought of a very funny thing. The seniority between us is like a mess. When we were on Kunlun Mountain, didn't you accept me as a registered disciple? Now here, your master, Masato Kahara, has to call Tianlan martial uncle. Then you will become a junior to me, won't you?" Su Qingjun thought it was true. She snorted and walked forward grumpily, saying, "Don't expect me to call you martial uncle." Interrupted by him, Su Qingjun forgot what she wanted to ask White Lotus. As for Lu Chen, he smiled and walked into the dark cell with her. Most of the cells in the world were dark and depressing because they were a place to imprison people and make them lose their freedom. It was a place where countless pains were created. Almost no one liked to stay here. No matter the prisoners or the people who were themselves free. Su Qingjun didn't like this kind of place either, so she was surprised and puzzled that Lu Chen specifically asked her to come here. But she was not a rebellious person. In fact, for so many years, although she carried the name of a genius, she basically didn't do anything too rebellious, whether in her family or in her sect. So she still came here. She was a good daughter in the eyes of everyone in her family. She was a genius disciple in the eyes of her master. Her cultivation was brave and vigorous. It seemed that her life would be smooth sailing according to people's expectations, and she might not even encounter a few big storms. At least so far, Su Qingjuan's life was almost like this. The reason why it was more or less the same was because a few years ago, she had also encountered a huge accident and witnessed the death of her younger brother. The past became a knife, hidden in everyone's hearts. From time to time when they thought of it they would be cut, which made people feel a little sad. Lu Chen led Su Qingjun forward and from time to time introduced the situation in a low voice to her. As for old Ma, he had been following behind them, his eyes vigilantly looking at the cells around them. This prison was specially set up by the Fuyun office to imprison the evildoers of the devil cult. After so many years of blood feud, of course the Fuyun office would not be courteous to these mortal enemies. Therefore, this prison was very dirty, very messy, very dark, and very smelly. It was very much like the dark place in those stories where all the evildoers gathered. It was very disgusting. The prison cells on both sides of the road, other than the hard and wide stone walls, were almost all surrounded by iron bars as thick as a wrist. Most of the prisoners locked up here, which were the evil cult's evil people and captives, all looked lifeless. They hid in the dark corners of the cells, as if they were afraid of the light. Occasionally they would look with hatred, or with completely numb eyes at the figures who had just passed by, sitting motionless in the dark. The surroundings were quiet but this dark prison looked unusually scary. There was even a faint feeling of deprivation of humanity, making people tremble with fear and especially disgusted. Both Lu Chen and old Ma were indifferent to the uncomfortable situation in this prison. They indifferently walked forward, as if they did not feel anything around them. Only Su Qingjuan's expression turned uglier as she walked, especially when she gradually went deeper into the prison. Slowly she saw more and more terrible mirror images. Her face started to turn pale. In the cells in the depths of the prison, the prisoners locked up were obviously of a higher status, and their cultivation was also stronger. However, more countermeasures had also appeared. Some were chained up, some wore heavy shackles, and some were covered in blood. There were obvious signs of torture, and they looked very miserable. Most of the prisoners here looked very weak. They were groaning in pain, gasping for breath, as if they were the weak and tiny souls in this demonic prison. As they continued to walk forward, when they were about to reach the deepest part of the prison, Su Qingjun suddenly stopped. Her face turned abnormally pale, even bloodless. Because here, in the cell that she had just passed, she inadvertently saw a prisoner in an even more miserable state. It was a man with missing limbs. This man's right arm and left arm were cut off by sharp blades. His left leg seemed to be a little limp, his face covered with weeds like a beard. When Lu Chen and the others walked over, this man seemed to be unaware of what was happening outside. He was just trying to drink water. There was a broken bowl on the ground, there was some dirty water in it. He knelt on the ground and stretched his neck, like a dog trying to put his face into the broken bowl to drink. Su Qingjun seemed to be unable to bear it anymore. She suddenly grabbed Lu Chen, her face pale, pointing at the man in the cell. Even her voice was slightly trembling as she asked, this man, what did he do wrong to be treated like this?" Chapter 472. The passage of the prison immediately quietened down. Not only Lu Chen and old Ma's side, but also the prison guards who were leading the way and following behind. One must know that the most important prisoners in Fuyunji were imprisoned here. Every one of them was an evildoer of the devil cult, a great enemy with a blood feud. Of course, Fuyunji attached great importance to them. Therefore, even though Lu Chen's status was different now, the prison guards here could not really let the three of them walk in as they pleased. There were quite a number of guards accompanying them, but Lu Chen's identity as the disciple of Supreme Tianlan was still powerful, so everyone gave him some face and walked a little further away. At this moment, when they suddenly heard Su Qingjun say such words, and her tone was urgent, there seemed to be some indignation. Before Lu Chen and old Ma could react, several cold gazes swept over them. Lu Chen frowned slightly and said, "Those are the evildoers of the devil cult." Of course, those who were imprisoned in this prison were the remaining evildoers of the devil cult who had been fighting with Fuyunji for decades. Su Qingjun also knew this in her heart, but there was still some reluctance and anger in her expression. But as intelligent as she was, she quickly felt that the surrounding prison guards were looking at them with unfriendly gazes. Su Qingjun gritted her teeth and seemed to be a little hesitant, but in the end, she could not help but say, "I know they are evildoers of the devil cult. I won't say anything if you kill them, but such humiliation and torture, isn't it too much?" Lu Chen nodded, and then suddenly waved to one of the prison guards who was standing a little further behind. That person quickly walked over, bowed to Lu Chen and said, "Young master, what's the matter?" Lu Chen was startled for a moment. He probably didn't expect the guard to call him young master. However, this wasn't the time to worry about this. In any case, it was probably because he didn't have a public position yet, so it wasn't appropriate for others to call him that. Therefore he didn't say much and just asked, "I haven't asked for your name yet." The prison guard said, "I dare not. My surname is Chen, and my name is Guy." Lu Chen nodded, and then said to him calmly, "Can you tell this senior sister of the Kunlun party about the prisoner situation?" Chen Guy straightened up, glanced at Lu Chen, and then turned to Su Qingjun, expressionlessly pointed to the prisoner in the prison, and said, "This person is called Shang Fei, originally an altar master of the devil cult in the Western land. He has done many evil deeds and committed many bloody crimes. We caught him 2 years ago and locked him up here." At this time old Ma, who was standing at the side, suddenly made a sound of surprise, but no one noticed him. Only Lu Chen glanced at him out of the corner of his eye, and found that old Ma was looking at the mutilated devil cult prisoner through the iron bars. Lu Chen did not care about him, and quickly continued to ask Chen Guy, "What's the matter with the injuries on his body?" Chen Guy said, "Some of them are injuries from when we first arrested him, and some are from when we interrogated him." A trace of anger flashed across Su Qingjuan's face, and she said, "We, the Zhengxianmeng, are the leaders of the world's righteous faction, how can we?" Before she could finish her words, several gazes from the side, including Chen Gai's, became a little unhappy. Lu Chen shook his head, and after a moment of silence, he said to Chen Gai, "This Shiji Su, she probably did not know about those things before, so please forgive her." Chen Gai nodded slowly, and his expression softened a little. At the same time, he seemed to feel that the atmosphere here was inexplicably tense, and waved to the surrounding people. Those cold gazes immediately left, and everyone seemed to be relieved. Lu Chen said again, "How about this? Can I trouble you to tell Shiji Su what this person has done?" Su Qingjun was stunned for a moment, and her heart skipped a beat. She had a faint feeling that something was not right. Chen Gai, who was in front, did not hesitate too much. After nodding slightly to Lu Chen, he said, "This Shang Fei is the altar master of the devil cult. He looks gentle on the surface, but in fact, he is an extremely violent demon. The number of people killed by him adds up to at least 100, and as for the murders committed by the devil cult demons under his command, it is innumerable. Moreover, this person is vicious by nature. He often tortured his captives, and even skinned them. Several of our brothers in Fuyunji died in his hands." Su Qingjuan's face gradually turned pale. At the end of the story, Chen Gai turned around, looked at her and said, "Miss Su, you are the proud daughter of a famous sect, so you probably don't understand these dirty and disgusting things. But in this place, these people deserve it. You don't have to plead for them." Lu Chen walked over from the side, looked at Su Qingjuan's unusually ugly face, and did not say anything. He only whispered a few words in Chen Gai's ear. Chen Gai turned back to look at him, and then nodded. It seemed that he agreed. Lu Chen cupped his hands to show his gratitude. Then, they continued to walk forward. Chen Gai seemed to be a chatterbox, and walked in front of everyone. Every time they passed by a cell, he would speak about the identity and origin of the prisoner, and then introduce the various evil deeds of the person. Although his tone was very calm when he spoke, but the words between the lines made people tremble with fear. The darkest side of this world, those unimaginable and indescribable evil and terrible horrors, slowly surfaced. The gloomy, dirty and smelly prison seemed to have turned into a terrifying hell. Hundreds of ghosts walked in the night, horrible to look at. There were no images, and there were no screams and whimpers, but just imagining the images seemed to be suffocating. Su Qingjuan's hands slowly clenched, and her footsteps became heavier and heavier. Old Ma looked worriedly at the girl's pale face, hesitantly gave a look to Lu Chen. Lu Chen was silent for a moment, walked to Chen Gai's side, gently patted his shoulder, and then whispered a word of thanks. Chen Gai also nodded to Lu Chen, and then walked back and stood together with his other guards. Lu Chen walked to where she was, and stood with Su Qingjun, her face pale and breathing rapidly. He looked at the girl's eyes that seemed to suddenly be in a daze and whispered, "Now you know what kind of lunatics we are going to face?" Su Qingjun closed her eyes in pain, and after a while softly said, "Why did you bring me here and tell me all these?" Lu Chen said, "I am too lazy to meddle in other people's business, but you may have fought with people before, but you definitely have not really come into contact with these lunatics. I called you over today to let you see this place, is to let you at least be prepared, although the evil sect is weak now, and their strength is not what it used to be, but if there is a fight in the future, you must not have any kind thoughts of leniency." He stared at Su Qingjun, said, "I have seen with my own eyes, some good faction cultivators gained the upper hand in the battle with the evil sect, but in the end they were soft-hearted and not ruthless enough, and were suddenly overturned and lost their lives." After a pause, the corner of his mouth seemed to twitch slightly. "Among them, there were also some beautiful girls, because of this, fell into the hands of the evil sect." Su Qingjun was startled, looked at Lu Chen's ugly face, and couldn't help but asked, "What happened to them?" Lu Chen silently looked at Su Qingjun. For some reason, Su Qingjun at this time suddenly did not dare to look directly at this man's eyes. Her heart started to beat faster, as if she felt something. After a while, Lu Chen indifferently said, "Believe me, you don't want to know about those things." After speaking, he turned and continued to walk deeper into the prison. Ahead seemed to be reaching the end, which was also the last and most important prison cells. But at this moment, suddenly, Su Qingjun grabbed his hand. Her grip was so strong that even Lu Chen felt a trace of pain. Su Qingjuan's face right now looked a little scary, so pale that it was frightening, without a trace of blood. Her eyes stared at Lu Chen's eyes, as if there was a ball of fire burning. After a moment, she opened her mouth, her voice low, word by word said, "Why are you so clear? Don't tell me you saw it with your own eyes at that time." Once the words were said, the inside and outside of the prison, suddenly a dead silence, everyone's eyes, including those prison guards, even those sneaky cold eyes in the dark corners of the prison cells, all fell on Lu Chen. That gaze fell on him, as sharp and cold as a knife. Just like for so many years, the cruel pain that Lu Chen had to bear. Chapter 473. Lu Chen stood there, enduring the strange stares from the surrounding people, silent and did not speak a word. He looked at Su Qingjuan's pale face, her eyes although angry but still clear, like a mirror that had never been tainted by dust. Right and wrong? Right and wrong? Or perhaps only innocence, a pure heart untainted by dust? Was it because someone had once opened his arms in the darkness, used his chest and body to resist the raging tide that filled the sky? But everything that he had done in the past, was it really all right? Those choices, were there any selfishness, were there any fears, was it really worth it? This was not what Lu Chen had imagined. Today he had specially brought Su Qingjun here. It was to let her have a clearer understanding of the evil sect, to let this woman who had a warm memory with him, in the future possible battles and killings, have a higher chance of survival and safety. He did not want to see anything happen to her. Lu Chen opened his mouth, seemed to want to say something, but the next moment, he still maintained his silence. Perhaps even he himself did not know what to say? Su Qingjuan's beautiful face, from the initial pale, started to show surprise. She was stunned by Lu Chen's silence and then gradually turned into disappointment. Her emotions were so obvious that everyone could see it. She gently shook her head, looked at Lu Chen, and finally softly said, "I didn't expect you to be this kind of person." Her voice suddenly rose, her expression agitated and angry. She stared at the silent Lu Chen, like staring at a sinner. "Don't tell me you have really seen that kind of thing happen with your own eyes? Right before your eyes, you did not do anything. Watch that woman being." She did not continue her words. Perhaps she had never really seen that cruel scene, or perhaps she was too kind-hearted to say those malicious words, but just by imagining, right now it seemed to be enough to make the surrounding people's gazes turn into sharp whips, nailing that silent man on the invisible wooden frame, whipping him countless times. Covered with scars. Covered with cuts and bruises. That wooden frame was called justice. Also called morality. Su Qingjun suddenly turned around and walked away with large strides. She resolutely and angrily left this dark, dirty, and smelly prison. She didn't want to stay in this disgusting place for even a moment. The prison guards behind her subconsciously opened up a path as they watched the woman leave. They looked at each other and frowned slightly. Finally, their gazes landed on Lu Chen. No one spoke, but their gazes didn't seem friendly either. Perhaps in that silence, there was disdain, contempt, hidden anger, and silent condemnation. The situation had suddenly changed in the blink of an eye, catching everyone off guard. Even the usually calm and composed Lu Chen seemed to be at a loss at this moment. Fortunately, at this moment, a figure suddenly walked forward and blocked in front of Lu Chen. Then he laughed like a fool. "Ha ha ha ha, what's wrong with everyone? We are here to do something today. Why do you all look so lifeless? Ha 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 ha." Old Ma smiled and turned around. He patted Lu Chen's shoulder and said, "Let's go, it's just in front." Lu Chen glanced at him, slowly turned around and walked forward with Old Ma. After walking for about 10 steps, they arrived outside the last prison cell. There was a pillar in the prison cell, and on it was a prisoner with disheveled hair tied tightly with iron chains. There were many wounds and bloodstains all over his body. His head was drooping and he looked like he was unconscious. Looking at his face through the messy hair, it was the evil faction sorcerer, Chen He. Old Ma waved to the guards behind him and said, "Open the door, we want to interrogate this person." Accompanied by the clanking of the iron locks, the heavy iron door opened. Lu Chen and Old Ma walked in while the rest of the guards stayed outside. Lu Chen hadn't spoken a single word since the beginning. Even when he walked up to the prisoner, his expression still seemed to be a little dazed. Old Ma looked at him worriedly and looked behind him. Seeing that the prison guards seemed to have a tacit understanding to stand further away, he then heaved a sigh of relief. He walked to Lu Chen's side, lowered his voice and said softly, "I say, are you all right?" Lu Chen slowly shook his head, glanced at the unconscious Chen He and suddenly said, "Today I brought Su Qingjun over. I originally thought that after telling her about the evil faction's vicious methods, she would be on her guard. Finally, when we interrogate this person about Elder Ghost's whereabouts, maybe I will use some of the evil faction's cruel methods to make her understand more deeply." Old Ma gave a wry smile and said, "You really put in a lot of effort. Unfortunately, this matter seems to be messed up." Lu Chen silently nodded and said, "Yes." Old Ma sighed and said, "Actually, a girl like Miss Su, since young, she grew up in aristocratic families and famous sects. What she sees, knows and thinks, is different from us. It is really too normal. Let's go." Lu Chen suddenly interrupted his words. Old Ma was taken aback and said, "Not interrogating anymore?" Lu Chen indifferently said, "His injuries are so serious, and those people in Fuyunji's methods, how can they be worse than the evil faction? Till now they have not gotten anything out of him. I reckon I also have no way to pry open his mouth." After speaking, he turned and walked out. Old Ma hurriedly followed. Those prison guards standing outside were shocked, came up and asked, "Both sirs, are you not interrogating the prisoner anymore?" Lu Chen silently walked forward and did not answer. Old Ma gave a dry laugh, pointed to the unconscious Chen He in the cell and said, "That prisoner is still unconscious, and I have taken a look at his injuries. It is really very serious. He cannot withstand the heavy punishment. It will be very difficult to get anything out of him." 2 days later. "We will come again in 2 days." The few guards looked at each other, contempt flashed in their eyes, but they did not say anything and very politely sent the 2 of them out of the prison. Leaving that dark and oppressive prison, even though Old Ma was someone who had seen a lot of the world, he could not help but let out a long sigh of relief, mumbled, "That place is really not suitable for people to stay in." Lu Chen walked beside him, frowning and silent. As they walked, he suddenly glanced at Old Ma. Old Ma's heart jumped for no reason, said, "What? Did I really do something wrong?" Lu Chen asked him in a low voice. Old Ma was speechless. For a moment he did not know what to say. Of course, he would not say that Lu Chen was wrong, but just when he wanted to say that he did not do anything wrong and did the right thing, the scene from not long ago suddenly appeared in his mind. Su Qingjuan's sudden questioning was like a whip lashing at him. The imagined cruel scene in his mind made his words suddenly choke in his throat, unable to come out. After a while, Old Ma said bitterly, "Don't let your imagination run wild, it has been so many years. Moreover, back then when you were in the evil cult, if you really wanted to mess around, you would be surrounded by people from the evil cult. Wouldn't that be seeking your own death?" As if he had finally found a reason, Old Ma breathed a sigh of relief, nodded repeatedly and said, "So, even if you make a move to save people, most likely you will not be able to save people, and will instead harm your own life. It is not worth it, right?" Lu Chen's expression still looked very strange. He seemed to be suddenly immersed in the past, somewhat unable to extricate himself. After a while, his face suddenly became a little pale. Old Ma looked at him, couldn't help but be a little worried, and asked in a low voice, "Are you all right?" "I forgot the name." Old Ma was startled and said, "What?" Lu Chen slowly raised a palm, staring at his own palm. A trace of pain and confusion finally gradually emerged in the depths of his eyes. Even his voice carried a bit of bitterness. "I forgot that woman's name, Old Ma. I completely forgot her. Am I really like those people from the evil cult, born so cruel and heartless?" Lu Chen murmured, his face as pale as paper. Chapter 474. Behind the main hall of the Heavenly Law Hall was a stretch of green mountains. The trees on the mountain were verdant and the scenery was beautiful. At the peak of the mountain, there were clouds floating around all year round. Looking at it, it was like a fairyland. Even in the vast Sky Dragon Mountain range, it was a unique and good place. Such a spiritual mountain and blessed land was naturally occupied by powerful people, and this Baimu Peak was precisely occupied by the Heavenly Law Hall's true monarch Tiehu, who was in a favorable position, and became this deity transformation stage true monarch's dwelling in the true immortal alliance. There were many guards at the bottom of the mountain, but there were very few people at the top of the mountain. This was because Tiehu true monarch had issued a ban. No one could rashly go up the mountain without permission. As for the safety of the mountain, there was a deity transformation stage true monarch living there. What would he be afraid of? On the beautiful peak of Baimu Peak, there was a magnificent cave residence. This was Tiehu true monarch's temporary imperial residence. And in the entire Heavenly Law Hall, besides Tiehu true monarch, there was only one person who could freely enter and exit this place. That was Tiehu true monarch's adopted daughter, Song Wenji. Ever since this woman appeared at Tiehu true monarch's side, it seemed that she had always been taking care of this illustrious deity transformation stage true monarch's daily life. Therefore, this could probably be considered as Song Wenji's home. This charming and beautiful woman was lying on the bed, her bright eyes looking at the smooth stone surface of the ceiling. The stone surface was like a mirror, and there was an indistinct reflection of an old body lying on top of her white, soft, plump and beautiful body. The old body was constantly wriggling, and the sound of panting echoed in this quiet stone room, mixed with some strange moans. Her beautiful hair was disheveled, her cheeks were somewhat flushed, and moans were coming from her mouth. Each moan was soft and captivating, but also caused one's blood to boil. It was as if she was deeply immersed in that bewitching passion, and was unable to extricate herself. But only her pair of eyes were still quiet, bright, and cold. She looked coldly at herself in the reflection, and at the woman who was moaning in the flesh. Deep in her eyes, a trace of inexplicable pain and disgust flashed past. Suddenly, the old man's breathing increased by a few notches. Song Wenji's gaze suddenly changed from clear and bright to blurry and crazy. She suddenly stretched out her bare white arms and hugged the man's neck tightly. Then, the moans in her mouth also became louder, as if she had become incomparably happy at that moment. However, at the corner of her mouth, there was a faint mocking smile. Finally, with a few soft cries, the old man seemed to have lost all his strength. He suddenly relaxed and fell on Song Wenji's plump body. At this moment, all of Song Wenji's strange emotions disappeared. She suddenly became a well-behaved woman. She shyly and resentfully hugged the man. Using a soul-stealing voice, she complained with a bit of breath. "Godfather, are you trying to torture your daughter to death?" That white-haired man was Tiehu Supreme. At this moment, he did not have his usual solemn and dignified expression. Instead, there was a bit of lust. If this scene was seen by outsiders, the jaws of everyone in the world would drop. And after hearing the words of this coquettish goddaughter, Tiehu Supreme seemed to be even happier. He laughed out loud and even wriggled his body a few times. With a bit of obscenity in his mouth, he teased, "Ha ha ha ha, my good daughter, are you convinced, are you convinced?" Song Wenji exclaimed and then hugged Tiehu Supreme's body. With a slightly trembling voice, as if crying and laughing at the same time, she said, "I am convinced, your daughter is convinced." At this moment, Tiehu Supreme seemed to have finally obtained great satisfaction. His body lay to the side and started to breathe heavily. Then, he reached out and hugged Song Wenji's soft white body. He sighed and said, "My good daughter, if not for you, I feel that I have lived my life in vain." Song Wenji nestled in the arms of this deity stage supreme. Hearing this, she laughed and said, "Father, you are joking again. You are a deity stage supreme. You have lived your life in a high position. You have experienced many storms and seen many wonderful things. How could you have lived your life in vain? You only know how to coax me." Tiehu Supreme snorted and looked at the smooth mirror-like stone surface above his head. He said, "You don't understand. For so many years, I have been burdened by those false reputations. In front of everyone in the world, I am justice, I am a moral article. In everyone's eyes, I am born to be solemn and just, clean and self-respecting. There can be no mistakes. I used to think so too. That's why I lived like that for most of my life, until I met you." He suddenly spat and said with disgust and hatred, "I've finally seen through everything. All the people in this world are strict with themselves and strict with others. It's funny that I've been stupid for half my life. It's only now that I understand the principle of enjoying life in the present." Song Wenji was touched. She said softly, "Father, you have suffered. But it's okay. You have such a high level of cultivation. You must have a long life ahead of you. Let me accompany you in the future." Tiehu Supreme nodded his head and laughed. Of course, as long as you are with me." Song Wenji suddenly said coquettishly, "But my cultivation is not as high as yours. I will grow old in the future. Perhaps at that time you will not like me anymore." Lord Steelpot quickly shook his head and said, No, as long as I am here, you can use all the rare treasures and cultivation resources in the world. In addition to that, I will personally protect you. I guarantee that your cultivation will improve tremendously and no one will be able to catch up to you. Your appearance will also remain youthful forever. But if that's the case, after a long time, maybe you'll get tired of looking at me, and probably don't want me anymore." At the end of her sentence, Song Wenji's eyes actually turned red. She looked like she was moved and hurt, and she was actually about to cry. The Iron Pot Lord was a hero of his generation. He had an earth-shattering cultivation and supernatural powers, but at this moment, he was helpless and looked extremely embarrassed. The girl in front of him was really his precious treasure. He was afraid that she would fall. He loved her dearly and spoiled her endlessly. Immediately his forehead was full of sweat. He coaxed her continuously. He even pointed to the heavens and swore to the earth. He said all kinds of mushy words and promises non-stop. With great difficulty he managed to coax this goddaughter until her tears turned into a smile. Tiehu Supreme heaved a sigh of relief. They talked and laughed for a while. Then they stood up. Song Wenji helped him put on his clothes. Then she changed back to the dignified Tiehu Supreme. Song Wenji went to the side and poured a cup of tea for him. Iron Pot True Lord took a sip and suddenly looked into the teacup and said, "This is the famous tea of Kunlun Mountain, Little Crane?" Song Wenji smiled and said, "Yes. A few days ago, Lord Tianlan held a disciple ceremony. You went to congratulate him and gave him a gift. There was a little of this tea in the return gift. But it was not much." Tiehu Supreme nodded and said, "This tea is indeed rare. It is rare to have a little of it." Then he looked at Song Wenji dotingly and said, "If you like this tea, you can drink it first. I'll go to Tianlan later and ask him to bring some more." Song Wenji was stunned. There seemed to be a glimmer in the depths of her eyes. Then she said with a little doubt, "Don't go. Don't you have a normal relationship with that person?" True Monarch Tai who said disapprovingly, "It's just but who can really tear his face apart? Look at his disciple acceptance ceremony. Didn't I also go there? I have to give face. Moreover, if I ask him for some tea, he will give me face." Song Wenji suddenly smiled as if she was very happy. She said, "Thank you, foster father. You are so good to me." Tiehu Supreme looked a little proud. But after a while, he seemed to think of something. His face showed a thoughtful expression. Then he said slowly, "Speaking of this, I feel that there is something strange in Tianlan and Fuyunji recently." Song Wenji was surprised and said, "What's wrong?" Tiehu Supreme frowned and said, "He transferred a lot of people from the Kunlun party. He said that he wants to fight against the devil cult. Of course, he has been fighting against the devil cult for so many years. It is not the first time that he transferred people from the Kunlun party. It is not strange that he did not." After thinking for a long time, he still shook his head. Song Wenji looked at his expression and suddenly said, "Foster father, do you suspect that there is something wrong with Fuyunji?" Tiehu Supreme pondered for a moment and suddenly said, "Have you met Lu Chen, the new disciple of Tianlan?" "Yes." "Well, then do me a favor." Then, Supreme Tiehu's voice deepened, as if he was narrating something. Chapter 475. After the sky darkened, the bustling immortal city started to quiet down. Although there were many bustling places that were still brightly lit, and the laughter of welcome and farewell echoed in the night, most places still entered the silence of the night. In the alley behind the horse-washing bridge, a white-clothed girl walked over alone, and stopped in front of that house. Her figure seemed a little lonely, and her face faintly looked a little haggard. But from her expression, she had already recovered her initial calmness and beauty, and once again became a fairy that didn't eat the food of the mortal world. She was White Lotus. She stood at the door for a while, and using some unknown method, she gently opened the door and then walked in. Far behind her, on the horse-washing bridge outside the alley, two black figures slowly appeared. Seeing White Lotus walk into the house, they looked at each other, and seemed to have a feeling of relief. Finally returned. Following this little grand aunt for a few days and nights, I'm almost exhausted to death. Come on, at least she's safe and sound. Last night, you saw her walk to the edge of the immortal city. If she took another step forward, she would have crossed the boundary. My heart was hanging in my throat. The person in front said in a low voice, "What did you say?" The person at the side was startled, and then smiled bitterly. "Don't let your imagination run wild. That little girl is so beautiful. How many have you seen? I really don't want to kill her, but if I really did, I still feel that it would be a pity." The person in front was silent. He probably felt the same way. After a while he said unhappily, "Forget it. In any case, the orders from above are not to leave the city. Once you cross the border, you are not to be left alive. I don't know if that girl feels that way, but in any case, it's fine if she returns now." "Big brother, who do you think gave the order to kill her? It's really ruthless." "Ruthless what? You talk too much." The person in front was startled and covered the mouth of the person next to him. Then, he looked around vigilantly. After confirming that there was no movement around, he let go of his hand and shouted in a low voice. Are you crazy? White Lotus is with a mortal. How dare you talk nonsense about this? Ah! That person's neck shrank in fear. He seemed to have suddenly thought of something and looked at the house with some fear. The person in front also looked over. After a while, he seemed to be a little emotional. He sighed and said, Let's go. That girl's fate is not good, but it's not our fault. Someone will be coming over to take over later. Go and rest. The two shadows once again disappeared into the darkness, leaving only the silent night surrounding the houses. On the grass in the courtyard, the black dog was lying on the ground with a pair of dog eyes closed. It seemed that he had fallen asleep. Lu Chen was lying next to Atsu. His eyes were staring at the faint twinkling stars in the dark night sky, his body lying motionless. At this time, a voice came from the side. I say, what's so good about those stars in the sky? Why did you look at them for so long? Lu Chen turned around and looked at old Ma, who was holding a wine pot and drinking by himself. He shook his head and said nothing. Old Ma was a little helpless. He said, I say, you don't have to be like this, right? I've known you for many years. Don't talk about that stupid thing where you leave people to die. How many lives have you killed and how much blood have you seen? Your heart will only be harder than mine, not softer than mine. Why are you suddenly so inexplicably unable to think things through today? He suddenly seemed to think of something. A strange expression flashed across his face. He looked down at Lu Chen and said, Don't tell me, you really have some feelings for Su Qingjun? That's why you care so much about what she says? Lu Chen frowned. When he was about to speak, he suddenly heard light footsteps coming from the corridor ahead. Lu Chen and old Ma were both taken aback. They turned their heads to look at the source of the voice. A while later, they saw the white-robed Bai Lian walk out from the shadows of the corridor. She walked all the way to the courtyard and stood in front of them. Lu Chen and old Ma both stood up. Old Ma spoke first with a smile. White Lotus, you're back? White Lotus responded and nodded to him. Then she looked at Lu Chen. Lu Chen gave a hollow laugh. He felt a little uncomfortable. But after hesitating for a moment he still said, White Lotus, I really didn't mean to do this to you. I know. White Lotus interrupted Lu Chen. She looked calm and said, I've thought about it. It's my fault. I used to think that I was destined to have a smooth life because I have the talent of 5 pillars. Everyone would value me. Even after my master passed away, the other elders in the sect would do the same. But now I know that it doesn't include martial uncle Tianlan. I was too optimistic. Lu Chen and old Ma looked at each other and didn't know what to say for a moment. White Lotus was silent for a moment and said, I'm a little tired. I'll go to bed first. As she said this, she turned around and walked to her room. Unexpectedly, she was suddenly stopped by old Ma. White Lotus looked over with some surprise, only to see old Ma smile awkwardly. He turned around and ran into the house first, then tossed and turned inside for a while. Finally, he ran out with a large pile of bedding and clothes. He smiled dryly at White Lotus and then ran into Lu Chen's house. White Lotus was silent for a while and turned to look at Lu Chen. Lu Chen had an awkward expression on his face. He coughed dryly and smiled a little unnaturally. Old Ma lives at my place, and he's been getting bullied by Atu all day long. He can only sleep on the floor. Plus, you had such a big reaction that day, and we couldn't find you for a few days, so he thought you wouldn't come back. White Lotus snorted and glared at him. Then she strode past Lu Chen. Lu Chen quickly stepped aside as if he had done something wrong. When White Lotus was about to reach the door of the room, she suddenly turned around and called, Hey! Lu Chen said, What's wrong? White Lotus stared at him and said after a while, Do you think I'm still useful to martial uncle Tianlan? Lu Chen's heart suddenly tightened. Then he smiled and said, You're so powerful. Of course, you're useful. White Lotus nodded. It seemed that the fierceness and uneasiness hidden deep in her eyes softened a little. Then she turned around and went into the room. Lu Chen looked over there for a long time until old Ma walked back to him. Lu Chen looked back at him and saw that old Ma's face was a little strange. He couldn't help frowning and asking, What's wrong? Old Ma sighed softly and lowered his voice, saying, You should know in your heart that she's useless. Lu Chen was silent. Seeing that his face was a little ugly, Old Ma shook his head and changed the topic, saying, Forget it. Let's not talk about this. Anyway, it doesn't matter what we say. You haven't answered me yet. What were you thinking about when you were in a daze for so long? Lu Chen was silent for a moment and suddenly said something without rhyme or reason. Her name is Song Hui. Old Ma was stunned and asked, What do you mean? Lu Chen said slowly, I've thought about it for a long time and carefully recalled it bit by bit. Finally, I remembered the name of the dead woman. Her name is Song Hui. He turned to Old Ma and said with a serious look on his face, Do me a favor, Old Ma. Go and check this woman's background. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.